The overhead fluorescent lights in the laundromat buzzed with that particular frequency that made Maya Reeves want to claw at her own skin by the third hour of any given shift. She stood behind the counter at the All-Star Wash and Fold on the corner of Kellerman and 12th in Dayton, Ohio, folding a stranger's fitted sheet into something that almost resembled a square, and tried not to think about the eviction notice taped to the door of apartment 3B. It was 7:42 in the morning on a Tuesday in early March, and the temperature outside had dropped to 19 degrees during the night, cold enough that the windows fogged over from the inside, where the industrial dryers pumped heat into the small front room. Maya was 34 years old. She had $84 in her checking account, $17 in cash folded into a coin purse at the bottom of her backpack, and exactly 11 days left before a deputy from Montgomery County would show up to change the locks on the only home her daughter had ever known. Her daughter's name was Rosie. She was 7 years old. She had her father's nose and her mother's stubborn chin, and she was currently at school wearing the same pair of shoes she'd worn every day for 8 months because Maya couldn't afford to replace them. The toes had split along the seam 3 weeks ago, and Maya had fixed them with clear packing tape that only lasted about 2 days before peeling off and leaving sticky residue on Rosie's socks. She folded another fitted sheet, then a pillowcase, then a hand towel that smelled faintly of cigarettes, and something sweeter underneath that she couldn't quite identify. The washing machine at station number 6 was making a sound like a dying cat, and Maya made a mental note to text Henry about it when he came in at noon. Henry was the owner of the All-Star, a 62-year-old man with bad knees and a kinder heart than he ever let anyone see, and he paid Maya $13 an hour under the table because her credit score had collapsed after the divorce and she couldn't pass the background check at the temp agency down the street. The divorce. That was still the word she used, though it felt too clean, too legal for what had actually happened. Marcus had left on a Wednesday morning in October, 18 months ago, and by Friday evening he had emptied their joint savings account, transferred the car title into his name only, and sent her a single text message that read, "Tell Rosie I had to go for work. I'll explain later." He had not explained later. He had not sent child support. He had not responded to any of the 17 messages Maya had left on his cousin's phone in the first month after he vanished. The last she'd heard, he was somewhere in Arizona working construction and had a new girlfriend who posted photographs of their vacations on social media. Maya had stopped looking at that account 6 months ago because every time she did, it made her want to drive to Phoenix and set something on fire, and she didn't have gas money for that kind of expedition anyway. She folded another sheet. The bell over the door chimed, and a woman came in with 2 garbage bags full of laundry, and Maya forced her face into the customer service smile she had perfected over years of working retail jobs that paid just barely enough to live on. The woman paid in quarters from a mason jar, and Maya counted them twice, and then she went back to folding. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket at 9:17. She almost didn't check it. In her experience, phone calls before 10 o'clock in the morning were rarely good news. It might be Rosie's school telling her that her daughter was sick, or it might be the landlord calling to remind her about the eviction, or it might be one of the 6 collection agencies that had her number and liked to call during business hours just to make sure she knew they were still watching. But she checked anyway, because if it was the school, she needed to answer, and the number on the screen was not a number she recognized. Area code 937. Local. She let it ring twice more while she set down the towel she was folding, and then she tapped the green button and pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello. I'm trying to reach Maya Elizabeth Reeves. Is this she?" The voice was older, male, and had the particular cadence of someone who had spent his entire professional career on telephones. Maya felt her stomach drop the way it always did when strangers used her full name. "This is her. Miss Reeves, my name is Walter Thurmond. I'm an attorney with Thurmond and Beek here in Dayton. Am I catching you at a bad time? I'm at work. What is this about? I'll try to be brief. I'm the executor of the estate of Harriet Reeves. I believe she was your great-aunt on your father's side. Is that correct?" Maya set the towel down on the counter. She pressed her free hand flat against the laminate surface and tried to breathe normally. Harriet Reeves. The name arrived in her mind the way a forgotten phone number does, sitting there in a drawer in her memory she hadn't opened in probably 15 years. Aunt Harriet. Her father's aunt, which made her Maya's great-aunt, a tall, sharp-faced woman who had lived alone in a row house somewhere on the east side of town. Maya had visited her exactly 3 times as a child, all of them before she turned 10, all of them uncomfortable in ways she couldn't have articulated at the time. I remember her. Yes, I haven't seen her in about 25 years. I didn't even know she was still alive. She passed away 6 weeks ago. I apologize for the delay in reaching out. It took us some time to locate you. She had moved into an assisted living facility about 4 years ago, and her personal effects were placed in storage. We've only just completed the inventory. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't understand what this has to do with me. I wasn't close with her. Miss Reeves, your great-aunt left a will. It was drawn up in 1997 and updated once, in 2003. The will names you as the sole beneficiary of her personal estate. Maya closed her eyes. She could feel a headache starting behind her right eye, the kind that came from not eating breakfast and drinking bad coffee on an empty stomach. Mr. Thurmond, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm at work and I really can't afford to get my hopes up about anything right now. What does that mean? Personal estate? I understand. I'll be direct with you. Your great-aunt's total estate, after final medical expenses and facility fees were paid, amounts to approximately $32 in a checking account, a steamer trunk containing personal effects that have been in storage at our firm's secure facility, and a small collection of household items currently being held by the executor of her living arrangement. The household items have already been donated to charity per her wishes. What remains for you is the trunk and the $32. There was a long pause. Maya was aware of the dryer at Station 3 finishing its cycle with a beep. She was aware of the woman who had come in with the garbage bags now standing by the bulletin board, reading flyers with disinterested attention. She was aware of the weight of her phone against her ear. $32. I'm afraid so. Miss Reeves, I'll be honest with you as well. This is not a lucrative inheritance. Most people in your situation would simply sign a document declining to claim it. There is a small administrative fee of $200 to process the transfer of personal property, and if you don't wish to pay that fee, the trunk will be disposed of along with any contents. The $32 would revert to the state. $200? That's correct. I recognize it may not be worth it for you to claim. Many people do decline in situations like these. I would understand completely if you chose to do so. Maya exhaled slowly. $200. She did not have $200. She had $84 in checking and $17 in cash and a stack of bills sitting on her kitchen counter that added up to well over $900 in past due amounts. She would have to physically laugh if she hadn't been so tired. I can't afford $200, Mr. Thurmond. I understand. In that case, wait. Just wait. Let me think. She did not know why she said it. $200 for a steamer trunk full of a dead stranger's belongings and $32 that would barely cover gas for a week was not a good deal. It was not even an okay deal. It was actively worse than nothing because she would be $200 further in the hole, and she did not have $200 to get into the hole with in the first place. But the voice on the phone had said personal effects, and Maya had suddenly remembered, with a clarity she did not expect, the last time she had visited her Aunt Harriet's row house. She had been 9 years old. Her father had driven her there on a Saturday afternoon because Harriet had called and asked specifically to see her. They had sat in the front parlor, which smelled like lavender and old books, and Harriet had shown her a cabinet full of photographs and told her stories about the women in their family that Maya had never heard before. Great-grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers. Women who had worked in textile mills and women who had run boarding houses, and one woman, Maya remembered now, who had apparently been some kind of jewelry designer in Chicago during the 1920s. You remember things, Harriet had said to her that day. I can see it in your face. You remember things the way I do. So I'm going to tell you some things worth remembering. Maya had not thought about that afternoon in 25 years. She did not know why she was thinking about it now. Mr. Thurmond, how long do I have to decide? Technically, you have until the end of the month. That gives you roughly 3 weeks. Can I come look at the trunk before I decide? Normally, no. But given the circumstances, I think I can arrange a viewing. We have a secure storage room here at the firm. If you'd like to come by sometime this week, I can let you look at the trunk and its contents. You still cannot take possession without paying the administrative fee, but you can look. Today? Can I come today? I get off work at 4. We close at 5. If you can be here by 4:30, I'll stay. My office is on 2nd Street, near the courthouse. I'll text you the address. Thank you. I'll be there. She ended the call and stood behind the counter staring at her phone for a long time. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The dryer at station 3 beeped again. The woman with the garbage bags finally approached the counter with her coins, and Maya counted them 3 times before she got the math right. At 4 o'clock exactly, Maya pulled her car, a 2007 Honda Civic with 217,000 miles on the odometer and a check engine light that had been on for the better part of a year, into the parking lot behind the law firm of Thurmond and Beek. The building was narrow and red brick, wedged between a sandwich shop and a place that sold custom suits, and it had the kind of frosted glass entrance that suggested either respectability or that someone had broken the window and installed the frosted glass to hide the damage. She picked up Rosie from the after-school program at the YWCA 3 blocks away and brought her with her, because she could not afford the $12 an hour that the program charged for extended care, and because Rosie had looked tired today in a way that made Maya want to keep her close. Rosie sat in the back seat with her backpack in her lap, reading a library book about a girl detective, and when Maya pulled into the parking lot, Rosie looked up and asked if they were in trouble. Not trouble, baby. We're just meeting a lawyer. It's good news, maybe. Or maybe nothing. But not trouble. Is it about Dad? No, baby. It's not about Dad. It's about your great-great-aunt. She died, and she left me something in her will. Rosie considered this with the careful seriousness she brought to most adult conversations. She was a quiet child, more so than Maya had been at her age. She had been loud and funny and chaotic until about 18 months ago, and then her father had left, and she had grown quiet the way trees grow still before a storm. Maya worried about it constantly. She had tried to get Rosie into counseling through the county mental health program, but the wait list was 6 months long, and they were still waiting. Is it a lot of money? No, baby. It's not money. It's an old trunk. I just want to see what's in it. Like a treasure chest? Probably not like a treasure chest. Probably just old stuff. But we'll look together, okay? Rosie nodded and unbuckled her seatbelt, and they walked together across the parking lot to the back door of the building, which had a small intercom next to a brass plaque with the firm's name engraved on it. Maya pressed the button, and a voice told her to come up to the second floor. Walter Thurmond was exactly what his voice had suggested. A tall, thin man in his late 60s, with thick white hair that had been combed back from a high forehead, wearing a gray suit that looked like it might have been expensive in 1988, but was now just old. He met them at the top of the stairs and shook Maya's hand with a dry, firm grip, and when he saw Rosie, his face softened into something that was almost a smile. And who is this young lady? My daughter. Rosie. I hope it's okay. I didn't have anywhere else for her to go. Of course. Please, come through. I've pulled the trunk out of storage and put it in our conference room. I thought you'd want some privacy. The conference room was small and wood-paneled and smelled like furniture polish. In the center of the room, on a long oval table covered with a protective pad, sat a steamer trunk. It was the kind of trunk that Maya had only ever seen in movies, black canvas stretched over a wooden frame, bound with leather straps and brass fittings. The brass had tarnished to a dark green in places, and the canvas had worn through at the corners, exposing the wood underneath. A small paper tag hung from the handle by a piece of twine, and on the tag, in faded ink, someone had written H. Reeves, 1994. She had it with her when she moved into the assisted living facility in 2020, Walter said. She told the staff it contained family heirlooms and that she wanted it kept safe. When she passed, they contacted us, and we took possession of the trunk on behalf of the estate. Maya approached the trunk slowly. Rosie held her hand. The latches were brass and slightly corroded, and when Maya pressed down on them, they clicked open with a satisfying mechanical sound that made her think, absurdly, of the library when she had been a child and had discovered the feeling of opening a book nobody had checked out in years. She lifted the lid. The interior of the trunk was lined with faded pink satin that had yellowed with age. Inside, neatly arranged, was a life. There were photographs, hundreds of them, bundled together with string or slipped into small envelopes. There was a stack of letters, tied with a blue ribbon that had gone dull. There was a wooden jewelry box, smaller than a shoebox, with a hand-carved rose on the lid. There was a pile of clothing at the bottom, old-fashioned blouses, and a beaded purse that looked like something from the 1920s. There were 3 leather-bound journals. There was a small tin that probably contained buttons. There was a folded piece of paper sitting on top of everything, like a note left for whoever opened the trunk next. Maya reached for the folded paper first. She unfolded it carefully, because the paper was old and thin, and she read the words written in a thin, spidery hand. For my great-niece Maya. I hope you still remember. That was all it said. Maya stood very still. Rosie was looking up at her, and Walter Thurmond was pretending to be interested in something on the wall behind her, giving her privacy, and Maya discovered that her eyes were stinging and that her throat had closed up. She remembered. She remembered the parlor that smelled like lavender. She remembered Aunt Harriet's thin hands showing her photographs and telling her stories. She remembered being 9 years old and thinking that the old woman was strange and a little scary, but also that she was being given something important, something she was supposed to keep. She remembered her aunt saying, "I can see it in your face. You remember things the way I do. So I'm going to tell you some things worth remembering." 25 years had passed. Maya had forgotten. But Aunt Harriet had not forgotten Maya. "Mr. Thurmond," Maya said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I'm going to pay the $200. I don't have it right now, but I'll have it by the end of the week. Can you give me that long?" "Of course. I can have the transfer paperwork ready for Friday. Does that work?" "Yes. Friday. I'll be here." She closed the lid of the trunk carefully, like she was closing the door to a room she would return to soon. Rosie squeezed her hand. They walked back down the stairs and across the parking lot, and sat in the Honda Civic with the heater blowing lukewarm air at them. And Maya put her hands on the steering wheel and tried to figure out where she was going to find $200 in the next 3 days. That night, after Rosie was asleep in the bed they now shared in the one bedroom of the apartment, Maya sat at the kitchen table and made a list. It was a list of everything she owned that might be worth money. Her wedding ring, which she had never gotten around to selling. A pair of gold earrings that had been her mother's. The microwave. The television, which was 7 years old and had a crack in the lower corner of the screen. A small collection of paperback books. The coffee table. She estimated that, if she sold everything on the list, she might clear $300. It would mean the apartment would be empty by the time the deputy came to change the locks. It would mean starting over with nothing. It would mean Rosie's room would have no bed. But they were going to lose the apartment anyway. She had known it for weeks. There was no version of the math that worked where she stayed. And if she was going to lose everything anyway, she could at least lose it for something. She called her sister Denise at 10:30. Denise lived in Cincinnati with her husband Robert and their 3 children. She was 37, 3 years older than Maya. She sold real estate for a mid-sized firm and made enough money that she drove a new car every 2 years. She and Maya had been close as children, and then less close as teenagers, and then almost estranged in their 20s, and then something that resembled a truce in their 30s. They spoke on the phone every few months. They saw each other at holidays, sometimes. Denise had lent Maya $400 2 years ago, right after Marcus had left, and Maya had paid her back in small installments over 8 months, and Denise had not offered to lend her anything since. Maya did not want to call Denise, but she was running out of options. "Maya." Denise's voice was sharp, already suspicious. "It's almost 11. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I mean, a lot of things are wrong. But I'm not calling about an emergency. I'm calling because I need to talk to you about something." "Oh God. You're not moving back in with Mom, are you?" "No. Mom's in Florida. I'm not going to Florida." "Thank God. What is it, then?" "Do you remember Aunt Harriet? Dad's aunt. The weird lady in the old house?" "Barely. She smelled strange." "Why?" "She died 6 weeks ago, and she left me something in her will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Maya could hear the television playing in the background on Denise's end, something with a laugh track. "How much?" "It's not money. It's a trunk, full of her stuff. Photographs and letters and an old jewelry box. Personal things." "You're calling me at 11 at night to tell me about a trunk?" "I'm calling you because I have to pay an administrative fee of $200 to take possession of it. And I don't have $200, and I'm thinking about selling everything in my apartment to come up with the money, and I wanted to know if you had any interest in the contents. Like, as a family thing. I thought you might want to know." Denise laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh Denise had been laughing at Maya since they were 7 years old, a short, dismissive sound that Maya had spent 30 years trying and failing to stop hearing. "Maya, honey, are you serious right now? You're broke. You're about to be evicted. You told me last month you were eating ramen 3 meals a day, and you're thinking about spending $200 on an old lady's junk? Are you out of your mind? It's not junk. It's family history. It's junk. Maya, listen to me. I'm saying this as your sister, who loves you. Call that lawyer back. Tell him you don't want the trunk. Tell him to throw it away or donate it or do whatever he does with abandoned inheritance. And take that energy and put it toward finding a new apartment. You need to focus. You have a kid to take care of. I know I have a kid. Denise, I am extremely aware that I have a kid. Then act like it. This is not the time to chase some sentimental fantasy about a great aunt you barely remember. This is the time to be a grown-up. I'm not going to give you $200 to buy a trunk full of photos. I'm sorry. I'm not. I wasn't asking you for money. Yes, you were. You were about to. I could hear it coming. Maya, I can't keep bailing you out. Robert and I have 3 kids. We have a mortgage. I already did my part 2 years ago. You need to figure this out yourself, and the first step is not being stupid about it. Maya closed her eyes. Her sister's voice was still talking, something about a real estate client and an open house and being tired, and Maya was holding the phone against her ear, but not really listening anymore. She was thinking about Aunt Harriet's note. She was thinking about the look on the old woman's face 25 years ago, when she had said, "You remember things the way I do." She was thinking about Rosie, asleep in the next room, who had asked earlier if the trunk was like a treasure chest. Denise, I have to go. Maya, promise me you'll call the lawyer tomorrow and tell him you're declining. Promise me. I have to go. I love you. Good night. She ended the call before Denise could respond. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She thought about everything her sister had said. She thought about the truth that was woven through it. She was broke. She was about to be evicted. She did have a kid to take care of. She could not afford to be stupid. But she also thought about the note. For my great-niece Maya. I hope you still remember. And she thought about the 3 leather-bound journals sitting at the bottom of the trunk, and the packet of letters tied with a ribbon, and the wooden jewelry box with the hand-carved rose on the lid. Aunt Harriet had kept these things safe for decades. She had carried them with her when she moved into assisted living. She had paid money, presumably, to have them stored properly. She had written Maya's name on a note and put it on top of the trunk so that whoever opened it next would know it had been left for her specifically. Somebody in this life had thought of Maya. Somebody had thought of her enough to leave her something and had trusted her to understand. Maya got up from the table. She went into the living room and looked at her wedding ring, which had been sitting in a dish on top of the bookshelf for 18 months. She picked it up and put it in her pocket. She went into Rosie's room and stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her daughter sleep. And then she went back to the kitchen and started making a new list. On Wednesday morning, Maya drove to a pawn shop on Wayne Avenue that she had passed 100 times and never stopped at. The man behind the counter was in his 40s, heavy-set, wearing a plaid shirt and the kind of slow, careful expression that meant he had been watching desperate people walk through his door for most of his adult life. Maya put the wedding ring on the counter. He examined it with a jeweler's loupe for almost 2 full minutes before he quoted her a price. 95. It's 14 karat. It's got diamonds. Chips. Barely counts. 95. 110. 100. That's my final. Maya took the 100. She put it in her wallet and walked back to her car and sat there for a while before she started the engine. She had bought that ring with Marcus at a jewelry store in the Dayton Mall. It had cost $400 at the time, which had felt like a fortune to both of them. They had been 26 years old. They had been laughing. She had a photograph of that day somewhere, though she did not know where. Probably in a box in the closet, with other photographs she had not been able to throw away but also could not bring herself to look at. She drove to a consignment store on Far Hills Avenue and sold her mother's gold earrings for $40. She drove to a used bookstore and sold 30 paperback novels for $60. She called Henry at the laundromat and asked if she could pick up a double shift on Thursday, and he said yes. That would get her another $104 before taxes. By Thursday night, she had $322 in cash. Enough for the administrative fee, and enough for gas, and enough to buy Rosie a new pair of shoes from the Payless over on Brown Street, which was the first thing Maya was going to do once the trunk was officially hers. On Friday at 4:30, she walked back into Walter Thurman's office. Rosie was with her again. Maya signed a series of documents that transferred ownership of the trunk and the $32 in Aunt Harriet's checking account. She counted out $200 in cash onto Walter Thurman's desk, and he gave her a receipt on firm letterhead, and then he helped her carry the trunk down the stairs and out to her car. It weighed more than Maya had expected. They had to wedge it into the back seat, because it would not fit in the trunk of the Honda Civic, and Rosie sat in the front passenger seat for the first time in her life, which Maya knew was not safe at her size. But they were only going 6 blocks and Maya could not see another way. She drove carefully. She pulled into the parking lot of the apartment building where she would be living for 11 more days, and she asked her upstairs neighbor Deshawn to help her carry the trunk up to the 3rd floor, and he did, and she gave him a $5 bill for his trouble, which he tried to refuse but eventually accepted. The trunk sat in the middle of Maya's small living room, black and weathered and dignified, like something out of another century that had somehow arrived in hers. Rosie sat down next to it on the carpet. Maya made them dinner, macaroni and cheese from a box with frozen peas mixed in. They ate on the couch with plates on their laps. When they were done, Maya washed the dishes, and then she sat down on the floor next to her daughter, and they looked at the trunk. "Can we open it?" Rosie asked. "Yeah, baby. We can open it." Maya lifted the lid. The smell came out, the same smell as at the lawyer's office. Old paper and lavender, and something mineral underneath, like the inside of a cedar chest. Rosie leaned in and looked at the photographs and the letters and the wooden jewelry box and the blouses folded at the bottom, and her eyes went wide in the way children's eyes go wide when they realize they are looking at something real, something that matters, something they have been waiting for without knowing they were waiting. "Mama, what is all this?" "I don't know yet, baby. I think it's our family. I think this is everybody who came before us." Rosie reached into the trunk and pulled out the first thing she could reach, which was one of the leather-bound journals. She handed it to Maya. Maya opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was elegant and looping, the handwriting of someone who had been taught penmanship in school and had never stopped practicing. The first page was dated March 14th, 1962. Maya read the first sentence out loud. "Today I received word from Chicago that Mother's estate has been settled." The words hung in the air. Maya kept reading, silently now, and Rosie leaned against her shoulder. The entry went on for 3 pages. It was written by Aunt Harriet, who had been 28 years old in 1962. It described, in careful and measured language, the death of her mother, who had been Maya's great-grandmother, a woman named Eleanor Reeves, who had lived in Chicago for the last 40 years of her life and had, apparently, worked as a jewelry designer. Eleanor Reeves, the name from 25 years ago, from the afternoon in the parlor. The woman who had been some kind of jewelry designer in Chicago in the 1920s. Maya had not believed her aunt's story at the time. It had seemed too specific and too romantic to be true. But here it was, written down in a journal from 1962, in the hand of a woman who would have known. Maya turned to the next page, and the next. The journal entries described, in painstaking detail, the process of dividing up Eleanor Reeves's belongings. There had been furniture and clothing and books, and, yes, jewelry. A great deal of jewelry. Pieces Eleanor had designed herself, pieces she had collected from colleagues in the trade, pieces that had been given to her by the people she had worked with over a career that had spanned from 1922 to 1958. Most of it, the journal said, had been sold at an estate auction to pay debts and taxes. But certain pieces, Harriet had written, I could not bring myself to sell. They have been too much of our history. I am keeping them, and I will keep them safe, and when the time comes, I will leave them to someone who will understand. Maya closed the journal slowly. She looked at the wooden jewelry box with the hand-carved rose on the lid. Her hands were shaking as she reached for it. She did not know what she was about to find. She did not know if it was anything, or nothing, or something in between. But she knew that Aunt Harriet had kept this box for more than 60 years. She knew that Aunt Harriet had written Maya's name on a note and left it on top of the trunk. She knew that her great-aunt, who had been strange and a little scary and very kind, had been waiting for someone to open this box, and she had chosen Maya to be the one to do it. The box was heavier than it looked. The carved rose on the lid had been smoothed by decades of handling. The brass clasp was tarnished, but still worked. Maya lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in what looked like dark blue velvet that had faded to a dull gray in places, were rings and brooches and necklaces, and a pair of earrings with stones the size of small grapes. And Maya did not know anything about jewelry, had never known anything about jewelry. But she could see that these pieces were old, and she could see that they were beautiful, and she could see, with a dawning clarity that made her chest ache, that they had been made by hand, by someone who had loved what she was doing, by someone who had cared enough to make every facet and every setting and every curve exactly right. Rosie reached into the box and picked up a brooch. It was shaped like a peacock, with a long tail made of tiny colored stones that caught the overhead light and sent it scattering across the wall in little flashes of green and blue and gold. "Mama," Rosie said very quietly. "Mama, is this real?" Maya could not answer her. She was staring at the ring she had just picked up, a band of pale gold set with a single dark stone, cut in a pattern Maya had never seen before. She turned it over in her fingers. On the inside of the band, she could see tiny letters stamped into the gold, letters so small she had to squint to read them. E. Reeves, 1927. The words, E. Reeves, 1927, echoed in her head. Her great-grandmother's signature, stamped into the gold of a ring that had been sitting in a wooden box in a steamer trunk for decades, waiting for someone to open it. Maya sat on the floor of her soon-to-be former apartment, holding the ring in one hand and her daughter's hand in the other, and she realized she did not know what she was holding. She did not know if it was worth anything. She did not know anything at all, but she knew who to ask. She set the ring down gently in the box. She closed the lid. She put the box back in the trunk and closed the trunk. She stood up and stretched her back, which had started to ache from sitting on the floor, and she looked at her daughter, who was still staring at the trunk like it contained every answer in the world. "Baby," she said, "we're going to figure this out. Okay, but it's going to take a little while, and I need you to promise me something." "Okay, I need you to promise me that you won't tell anybody about this. Not your friends at school. Not anyone. Not yet. Because I don't know what we have here yet, and I don't want anyone else to know before we do. Okay? Okay, I promise." "Good girl. Now go brush your teeth. It's past your bedtime." Rosie nodded and went to the bathroom. Maya sat back down on the floor next to the trunk. Her phone was in her hand. She was scrolling through search results on a browser tab she had opened with shaking fingers. She was looking for antique jewelry appraisers in Dayton, Ohio, and she was trying to remember what she had ever known about how you figured out whether something was valuable or not. She found 3 names. She wrote them down on the back of a grocery receipt. She closed the browser. She sat in the quiet apartment, with her daughter brushing her teeth in the next room and a trunk full of mysteries sitting on the carpet in front of her, and for the first time in a very long time, Maya Reeves allowed herself to feel something that was not fear. It was not hope yet. It was too fragile to be called hope. But it was the small, clean feeling of standing at the edge of something, of not knowing what was next, and of, for once, being curious about what came next instead of dreading it. She thought about her sister Denise, who had laughed at her. She thought about Marcus, who was in Arizona or wherever Marcus was. She thought about the eviction notice on the door of apartment 3B, and the deputy who would be coming in 11 days, and the $322 she had managed to scrape together by selling everything she had. She thought about Aunt Harriet, sitting in the parlor 25 years ago, telling a 9-year-old girl stories about the women in their family. And she thought, very quietly, I remember. The first appraiser Maya called on Saturday morning could not see her for 3 weeks. The second had retired the previous summer. The third was a woman named Eleanor Park, which Maya found briefly funny, because of the coincidence with her great-grandmother's name, and Eleanor Park ran a small shop called Park Antiques and Estate Jewelry on Main Street in Centerville, about 15 minutes south of Dayton proper. Eleanor Park answered the phone herself on the second ring. She had a warm, professional voice with a slight accent that Maya could not place, something vaguely Eastern European around the vowels. "I have some pieces I'd like to have appraised," Maya said. "They belong to my great-grandmother. I think they might be from the 1920s. I don't know if they're worth anything." "How many pieces are we talking about?" "I haven't counted yet. Maybe 20. There are rings and brooches and necklaces and a pair of earrings." "And you have some kind of documentation? Provenance?" "There are journals. My great-aunt kept journals. They talk about the pieces. I haven't read all of them yet." There was a pause. Maya could hear the faint sound of something being written down on the other end of the line. "Miss Reeves, when would you like to come in?" Today, if possible. If not, as soon as you can see me. I'm here until 5. Can you come at 2? Yes, I'll be there. She brought Rosie with her because she still could not afford childcare, and she brought the trunk with her because she did not want to leave it alone in the apartment, and she drove with it wedged into the back seat of the Civic, watching it in the rearview mirror at every red light like it might disappear if she did not keep an eye on it. The drive to Centerville took 22 minutes. She parked in a lot behind a row of brick buildings and sat in the car for a full minute before she could bring herself to get out. Park Antiques and Estate Jewelry occupied a narrow storefront with a green awning and a small gold-lettered sign in the window. Inside, the shop smelled like furniture wax and was lit by a combination of old-fashioned lamps and carefully placed spotlights aimed at glass display cases. Eleanor Park met her at the door. She was in her late 50s, small, with sharp gray eyes and silver hair cut short against her skull. She wore a gray wool blazer and looked like exactly the kind of person Maya would have expected to find in a place called Park Antiques. You brought the trunk. I didn't want to leave it at home. Wise. Please, come into the back. I have a room where we can work. The back room of the shop was a combination of office and workspace, with a long wooden table under a bank of bright lights. Eleanor Park helped Maya and Rosie carry the trunk in and set it on a padded section of the table. She offered Rosie a chair and a pad of paper and a handful of colored pencils, which Rosie accepted with the kind of quiet gratitude that made Maya want to protect her from every unkindness in the world all at once. Let's see what you have. Maya opened the trunk. She reached past the clothing and the letters and the photographs and lifted out the wooden jewelry box with the carved rose on the lid. She set it on the table in front of Eleanor Park. The appraiser did not reach for it immediately. She sat very still and looked at the box for a long moment before she spoke. This box, where did you get it? It belonged to my great-aunt. She kept it for 60 years. Before that, it was my great-grandmother's. Who was your great-grandmother? Her name was Eleanor Reeves. She was a jewelry designer in Chicago, from the 1920s until the 1950s, I think. Eleanor Park did not move. She was still looking at the box. Then, very slowly, she lifted her eyes to meet Maya's, and there was something in her expression that Maya could not read at first because she did not expect to see it. The appraiser looked like she had just been told a fact that rearranged something in her understanding of the world. Eleanor Reeves, is there any chance your great-grandmother worked at the Bertrand Studio? In Chicago on State Street? Maya stared at her. She had no idea. She had never heard the name Bertrand Studio in her life. But something in the way Eleanor Park had said it, the specific and quiet urgency, made her heart beat faster. I don't know. The journals might say. I haven't read them all yet. Why? Is that important? Eleanor Park did not answer immediately. She reached out, slowly, and put her hand on the lid of the box. She did not open it yet. She looked at Maya, and then she looked at the trunk, and then she looked back at Maya. Miss Reeves, before we go any further, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to answer me honestly. Do you have any idea what you might have brought into my shop today? No. That's why I'm here. Good. I want you to understand something. I have been appraising estate jewelry for 31 years. I have seen many pieces come across this table. Most of them are ordinary. A few of them are fine. A very few of them are remarkable. And almost never, in my entire career, have I seen something that I would call important. But when you said your great-grandmother was a jewelry designer in Chicago from the 1920s, and when I saw this box, which I recognize because I have seen photographs of it in a book I own, I had a feeling. And now I'm going to open this box, and we will see if my feeling is correct. She lifted the lid. The overhead lights caught the stones and the gold, and for a moment the whole box seemed to glow. Eleanor Park looked down at the contents for a very long time without speaking. She did not touch anything. She just looked. And then, with the kind of reverence that Maya had only ever seen in church, she reached into the box and picked up the peacock brooch that Rosie had held the night before. Miss Reeves, your great-grandmother did not just work in jewelry. Your great-grandmother was one of the most important female jewelry designers in American history between the wars. Her work was exhibited at the Century of Progress Exposition in 1933. She designed for private clients, including several actresses who were famous at the time. Her pieces are in museum collections, and most of her known work, which is a relatively small number of pieces, because she made everything by hand, is either in those museum collections or in the hands of a very small number of private collectors. Maya sat down. She did not remember pulling out the chair. She was just sitting down, and her hands were on her knees, and Eleanor Park was still holding the peacock brooch in her careful fingers. What does that mean? What are you saying to me? I am saying to you that this box contains what appears to be a substantial collection of original pieces designed and made by Eleanor Reeves. I am saying that if the pieces are authentic, and I will need time to verify that, then what you have brought into my shop today is not just a family heirloom. It is a significant holding of early 20th century American decorative art. I am saying that I do not yet know what these pieces are worth, because I will need to have them examined and authenticated, and because the market for work of this kind is specialized. But I can tell you, Miss Reeves, that if these pieces are what I believe they are, we are not talking about hundreds of dollars. We are not talking about thousands of dollars. We are talking about something considerably more than that. Maya was aware that Rosie had stopped drawing. Her daughter was looking at her across the table with wide eyes. Eleanor Park was still holding the brooch. Somewhere in the shop, a clock was ticking. I need to sit down. You are sitting down. I need to sit down more. Eleanor Park set the brooch back in the box with great care. She came around the table and put a hand on Maya's shoulder, and her grip was firm and steady, and Maya was grateful for it. Miss Reeves, I want to be very clear with you. I do not give numbers to my clients before I have done my work. I am telling you that you need to take your time. You need to let me authenticate these pieces properly. And in the meantime, you need to think very carefully about what you want to do, because the decisions you make in the next few weeks are going to matter for the rest of your life. Maya looked at the box on the table. She looked at the trunk on the floor. She looked at her daughter, who was 7 years old and still wearing shoes held together with packing tape. Mrs. Park, how long will the authentication take? 2 weeks, at minimum. Possibly longer, depending on what I find. 2 weeks. Yes. Maya thought about the eviction notice. 11 days. She thought about her checking account. She thought about Rosie. Mrs. Park, can we start tomorrow? Eleanor Park smiled for the first time since Maya had walked into her shop. Miss Reeves, we can start right now. The authentication process began that Saturday afternoon and unfolded over the following 2 weeks in a way that Maya would later remember as the strangest stretch of her entire life. She drove back to Centerville every day after her shift at the laundromat, sometimes with Rosie and sometimes alone if Henry's wife was willing to watch her daughter for a few hours in exchange for Maya cleaning their kitchen on Sunday. Eleanor Park worked with a quiet intensity that Maya found both reassuring and unnerving. She photographed every piece from multiple angles under specialized lighting. She weighed each item on a precision scale that measured to the hundredth of a gram. She examined the hallmarks and the maker's marks and the tiny stamped signatures with a loupe that magnified the gold to the texture of honeycomb. On the second day, Eleanor Park pulled a thick book down from a shelf behind her desk and opened it on the table. The book was titled Women in American Jewelry Design, 1900 to 1960, and it had been published by a university press in 2014. Eleanor Park turned to a section near the middle, and there, on a glossy page under the heading Eleanor Reeves, Chicago, was a photograph of a woman in her 30s wearing a dark dress and a strand of pearls, sitting at a workbench with a magnifying glass in her hand. The caption identified her as Eleanor Margaret Reeves, born 1899, died 1961. She had worked at the Bertrand Studio on State Street in Chicago from 1922 to 1936, and then she had opened her own atelier, which she ran until she retired in 1958. Maya stared at the photograph. She had never seen a picture of her great-grandmother before. The woman in the picture had a strong jaw and dark eyes and a mouth that looked like it was on the verge of saying something clever. She did not look like Maya, but she did, in a way that was hard to articulate, look like Rosie. The same serious chin, the same way of holding her head slightly tilted, like she was listening for something. She was your great-grandmother. I've never seen her face before. I have photocopies of several published articles about her. You can take them home with you. You should know who she was. Eleanor Park handed Maya a folder. Inside were newspaper clippings from the Chicago Tribune, from 1928 and 1931 and 1939. There were magazine features from a publication called American Jewelry Quarterly. There was a page from the catalog of the 1933 Century of Progress Exposition, which identified 4 of Eleanor Reeves's pieces that had been displayed in the Women in the Arts Pavilion. Maya read through the materials that night after Rosie went to sleep, sitting on the floor of the apartment next to the trunk, and she cried quietly for a long time, though she could not have explained exactly what she was crying about. On the 5th day, Eleanor Park confirmed that 7 of the pieces in the jewelry box matched pieces documented in the published scholarship on Eleanor Reeves's work. On the 7th day, she confirmed that 5 more pieces could be authenticated through her own examination of the construction methods and the signature hallmarks, even though they did not appear in any published source. On the 9th day, she confirmed that there were 3 additional pieces in the box that she believed to be authentic Reeves works, but that would require further investigation, possibly involving scholars at other institutions. On the 10th day, Eleanor Park sat Maya down in the back room of the shop and gave her the first serious estimate. "Miss Reeves, I want to be careful with what I tell you, because markets for specialized art objects are volatile, and because the final realized value of any collection depends heavily on how and where it is sold. But I have enough information now to give you a preliminary range. Based on comparable sales of Eleanor Reeves pieces at major auction houses over the past 15 years, adjusted for current market conditions, and factoring in the quality and completeness of the documentation you have, I estimate the total value of the jewelry collection to be between $4.2 million and $6.8 million. Maya did not respond. She was aware that Eleanor Park had said something, and she was aware that she had heard the words, but her brain had refused to assemble the words into meaning. She sat in the chair and stared at the wall behind Eleanor Park's head, at a framed certificate from the American Society of Appraisers, and she tried to make the words arrive. "I'm sorry, can you say that again?" "Between $4.2 million and $6.8 million. For the jewelry collection alone. That does not include whatever value the journals and the letters and the photographs may have, which could be substantial, because Eleanor Reeves's correspondence with other designers and with her clients is of genuine scholarly interest. It also does not include the wooden box itself, which was made by a furniture artisan named Ida Klimek, who worked in Chicago in the 1920s and whose pieces have their own market." Maya stood up. She walked to the small window at the back of the room and looked out at the alley behind the shop, where a dumpster sat against a brick wall and a black cat was picking its way along the top of a fence. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "$4 million. At minimum. Potentially closer to 7, depending on how the market responds. These are estimates, Miss Reeves. I want you to understand that. Actual realization could be lower if a major sale goes poorly, or higher if there is competitive bidding among collectors. But we are not talking about a small number. We are talking about a life-changing number. $4 million. Yes." Maya turned around. Eleanor Park was looking at her with an expression that contained both professional composure and something softer, something that might have been concern. "Mrs. Park, I need to tell you something. My apartment is being repossessed in 6 days. I have $84 in my checking account. I spent everything I had to pay the administrative fee at the lawyer's office so I could take possession of the trunk. I sold my wedding ring on Wednesday. My daughter is wearing shoes held together with tape. I do not know how I am going to feed her next week." Eleanor Park did not look surprised. She looked like she had known some of this already, from the way Maya dressed, and the way she drove a car that sounded the way Maya's car sounded, and the way her daughter wore the same outfit 3 days in a row. "I thought as much. I cannot wait for an auction. I cannot wait for competitive bidding. I need money now." Eleanor Park nodded slowly. She was quiet for a long moment. "I would like to suggest an arrangement. I have a colleague in Chicago who buys and resells estate pieces. She is ethical. She will not cheat you. I can contact her today and ask whether she would be willing to purchase one piece from the collection, a piece of moderate value that we can document and release quickly, for a cash price that would allow you to stabilize your situation. This would not maximize the value of the collection. It would sacrifice some percentage of what you could otherwise realize, but it would give you immediate liquidity." "How much?" "I would propose selling the pair of earrings with the green stones. They are lovely, but they are among the less historically significant pieces. I believe my colleague would pay in the range of $40,000 for them, in cash, within 72 hours. $40,000. Yes." Maya had to sit down again. She had not eaten lunch. She had not eaten breakfast. She had been living for 10 days on coffee and the feeling of walking on a wire. Mrs. Park, you have been very kind to me. I do not understand why, and I am not going to pretend I do. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. If I do this, if I sell the earrings for $40,000, and then I sell the rest of the collection through proper channels over the next 6 months to a year, how much money am I realistically going to end up with, after your fees and auction fees and taxes, and everything else? After all costs, I would estimate that you would net somewhere between $3 million and $5 million. Possibly more. The tax situation on inherited property is complex and depends on the estate tax exemption in effect at the time of your great-aunt's death. I will put you in contact with an accountant who specializes in this kind of situation. But in round numbers, yes, $3 to $5 million. Maya sat with the number. It was a number she had no frame of reference for. She could not imagine $3 million any more than she could imagine the distance between the Earth and the Moon. She had spent the last 18 months counting every dollar. She had bought a gallon of milk last week and agonized over whether to get the store brand or the name brand because the name brand was 40 cents more expensive. She had walked past a coffee shop on the way to work and smelled the coffee and kept walking because a cup of coffee cost $4, and she could not justify $4 for a drink when she could make coffee at home for less than a quarter. $3 to $5 million. Mrs. Park, please contact your colleague. I would like to sell the earrings. I'll call her now. The call took 11 minutes. Eleanor Park spoke in a calm, professional voice, describing the earrings and the provenance and the authentication and the photographs she had already taken. When she hung up, she turned to Maya with a small smile. She will be here on Tuesday morning. She is flying in from Chicago specifically to see the earrings. She has authorized me to tell you that if the earrings match the description I gave her, which I am confident they will, she is prepared to purchase them on the spot for $42,000. That is $2,000 higher than my initial estimate. She is a very thorough person, and she knows the market, and she is excited about this. $42,000. Yes. Mrs. Park, I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by taking your time with the rest of this. You can thank me by not making rash decisions. You can thank me by making sure that your daughter never has to worry about shoes again. Maya drove home that night with a trembling in her hands that took 2 hours to subside. She stopped at a grocery store on the way and bought actual groceries for the first time in longer than she could remember. Steak, even. 2 small steaks, because Rosie liked steak, and Maya had not been able to afford steak since before the divorce. She bought a cake from the bakery section, a small yellow cake with chocolate frosting. She bought a gallon of orange juice, the good kind, not from concentrate. She paid with a debit card that for the first time in nearly 2 years did not get declined, because she had cashed Henry's paycheck on Friday and had not yet spent it. She cooked dinner with Rosie. They ate at the small kitchen table. Rosie asked her why she was smiling, and Maya told her that the lady at the antique shop had said good things about the jewelry, and that they were going to be okay, and that she did not want to explain more than that yet because she did not want to jinx anything, but that they were going to be okay, and Rosie was going to get new shoes soon, and maybe other things too. Rosie considered this with her usual seriousness. Then she said, very quietly, "Can we stay in our apartment?" And Maya realized, with a catch in her throat, that she did not know the answer to that question yet. She had 6 days before the eviction. She had $42,000 coming on Tuesday. The landlord had already filed the paperwork. She did not know if she could undo it even if she paid everything off. "I'm going to try, baby. I'm going to try." After Rosie went to sleep, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her phone and looked up the landlord's number. His name was Mr. Okafor, and he owned the building and 3 others like it scattered around the west side of town. He was a stern, businesslike man who had always been polite to Maya, but who had also been entirely unmoved by her explanations of why she had fallen behind on rent. Maya had stopped trying to explain herself to him 3 months ago. She had simply absorbed his letters and his notices and waited for the inevitable. She did not call him that night. She would call him on Tuesday, after the money cleared. She would offer him the back rent and the current month's rent and a deposit toward next month. She would apologize. She would tell him that her circumstances had changed. She would ask him, please, if there was any way to rescind the eviction filing. If he said no, she would start looking for another apartment. But she would be looking with $40,000 in her pocket instead of $84,000, and that would change everything about what was possible. On Monday morning, she went to work at the laundromat. She folded sheets. She counted quarters. She smiled at customers. She did not tell Henry what had happened because she did not trust her voice to stay steady, and because part of her was still afraid that something would go wrong and the deal would fall through, and she would be right back where she had been before. She worked her full shift. She picked Rosie up from school. She made dinner. She went to bed early because she had to be up at 5 to drive to Centerville for the morning meeting with the buyer. Her phone rang at 9:30 that night. It was Denise. Maya. Her sister's voice was different than it had been the week before. It was tight and controlled, with the particular brittleness that Denise produced when she was trying not to lose her temper. Hi, Denise. I got a call today. From an appraiser in Centerville. A Mrs. Park. Maya sat down on the edge of the bed. She did not know why Eleanor Park would have called Denise. Eleanor Park did not have Denise's number. Eleanor Park had not even asked for anyone else in the family. What did she say? She said she was calling to verify some family history. Apparently, she had tried to reach someone on your father's side to ask about Eleanor Reeves, and she had found my name through a genealogy website. She asked me some questions about our great-grandmother, and then she said, in passing, that she was authenticating a collection of jewelry that had been inherited by my sister. Maya, is that true? Maya closed her eyes. Of course. Authentication of significant pieces often required corroborating information from family members. Eleanor Park had been doing her job. She had been thorough. She had been careful. And in doing so, she had inadvertently told Denise exactly what Maya had been trying to keep quiet. Denise, I was going to tell you. I promise I was. I just wanted to wait until I knew what I had. What you have. What you have, Maya. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. A week ago, you called me at 11 at night to tell me about a trunk full of old junk, and you asked me if I wanted to pay for it. I told you it was a bad idea. I told you to decline it. You told me you were going to do it anyway. You went and paid the $200, which, by the way, I have no idea how you came up with. And now I'm finding out from a stranger that the trunk apparently contains jewelry worth what? How much, Maya? Maya did not answer. How much, Maya? Denise, it's not confirmed yet. The authentication is still ongoing. The numbers are estimates. I don't know what it's going to end up being. Give me a number. Denise, give me a number, Maya. I am your sister. We are going to talk about this, and you are going to tell me a number, and we are going to figure out what to do about it together. Because this is a family matter. Aunt Harriet was my great-aunt too. Eleanor Reeves was my great-grandmother too. This is our heritage, Maya. Not yours alone. Ours. Denise. The will name me specifically. Mr. Thurmond, the lawyer, he showed me the document. Aunt Harriet left the trunk to me. I don't care what the document says. That document is from 2003. Aunt Harriet had dementia in her last years. She wasn't in her right mind when she decided any of this. We can contest that will, Maya. I've already talked to someone. If there's enough money involved, we can contest it, and we will win, because no court is going to award a multi-million-dollar estate to a single parent who can't keep a roof over her head. Maya could feel something happening in her chest. It was not panic. It was colder than panic. It was the slow, quiet realization that her sister had already made up her mind about all of this, that the phone call was not a conversation, that Denise had called Maya with a plan already in place. Denise, stop. Maya, I am not going to stop. You need to understand something. This is not about money. This is about family. This is about doing the right thing. You have a kid. You are in a desperate situation. You are going to make desperate decisions, and those decisions are going to hurt you, and they are going to hurt Rosie, and they are going to hurt our family. I am not going to let that happen. We are going to handle this together, as a family, and we are going to make sure that what was left to us is used wisely. The will did not leave it to us. The will left it to me. The will is going to be contested. On what grounds? On the grounds that Aunt Harriet was not of sound mind when she wrote it. On the grounds that she had no meaningful relationship with you and had been manipulated. On the grounds that the estate is significantly larger than anyone understood and that a single beneficiary is inappropriate given the family's size. Manipulated. Denise, I have not seen Aunt Harriet in 25 years. I did not even know she was alive. I did not manipulate anyone. That is going to be a question for a judge. Maya sat in silence for a long moment. She could hear her sister breathing on the other end of the line, and she could hear, faintly in the background, the sound of Robert's voice saying something she could not quite make out, And then Denise's voice sharp and low, away from the phone, telling him to be quiet. Denise, is Robert there with you? Robert is my husband, Maya. He lives here. Yes, he is here. Did Robert put you up to this? No one put me up to anything. Because this does not sound like you. This sounds like Robert. Robert was a commercial real estate broker in Cincinnati. He was a loud man with a loud laugh who wore expensive watches and talked a lot about opportunity and leverage and making things happen. Maya had never liked him. She had tolerated him for Denise's sake for more than a decade. And she had always sensed that Robert saw her as a problem to be managed, a reminder of the fact that his wife had come from a family that was less prosperous than his own. Maya, I am going to say this once. You have a choice to make. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. The easy way is that you acknowledge that this inheritance belongs to the whole family, and you agree to split it fairly among me, you, and Kyle and Emma. Kyle and Emma. Maya had not heard those names spoken in her life until that moment, but she had heard versions of them. She knew, in a general way, that Denise had cousins on their father's side whom she was friendly with. Maya was not friendly with them. She had not been friendly with them when they were children, because they had lived in Indianapolis and she had lived in Dayton, and she had not seen them in 20 years. The idea that Kyle and Emma, whoever they were as adults now, would have any claim on the contents of Aunt Harriet's trunk was so absurd that Maya almost laughed. Kyle and Emma have not seen Aunt Harriet either. They have no claim. They are family, Maya. They are strangers. They are family. And they are coming. They are going to want to be part of this conversation. You are going to need to meet with all of us. We can come to Dayton on Friday. We will work out an arrangement. A fair arrangement. And you are going to need to hand over the jewelry for safekeeping until we work things out. Because frankly, Maya, you living in an apartment that is about to be seized by the sheriff is not a safe place for millions of dollars of antiquities. Denise, I am not handing over anything. Then we go to court. Then we go to court. Maya, please, I am trying to help you. You are trying to take something that is not yours. There is a difference. Maya ended the call. She sat on the edge of her bed with the phone in her hands, and she watched it come back to life as Denise called again, and she ignored it. She watched it ring 5 more times over the next 20 minutes, and then she put it on silent and set it face down on the nightstand. She went to the living room and knelt next to the trunk and put her hand on the lid. The jewelry box was not inside. It was sitting on the top shelf of her closet, wrapped in a pillowcase, because Eleanor Park had told her to bring it to the shop in the morning for the meeting with the buyer. The trunk contained the rest. The journals, the letters, the photographs, the clothing that had belonged to women Maya had never met and would never meet. She lifted the lid and looked in, and the old smell drifted up at her, lavender and paper and cedar, and she closed her eyes and breathed it in. She did not know what she was going to do about her sister. She did not know what a court case would cost or how long it would take or whether Denise was bluffing or whether she was not. She did not know any of those things. But she knew what Aunt Harriet had written on the note. For my great-niece Maya. I hope you still remember. Aunt Harriet had known. She had lived in a row house alone for decades, and she had kept these things safe, and she had written a will that named Maya specifically, and she had done it all because she had decided, at some point, that Maya was the person she trusted to carry this forward. Maya did not know why Harriet had chosen her. She did not know how Harriet had even known enough about her adult life to believe that she was worth choosing. She suspected that her father, before he had died in 2015, had told Harriet things about Maya, and that Harriet had listened. Maya would never know for certain, but she knew, sitting on the floor of her apartment with her hand inside the trunk, that she was not going to let her sister take this away from her. Not because of the money, not even because of the principle, though the principle mattered. She was not going to let her sister take this away from her because Aunt Harriet had asked her not to. Aunt Harriet had asked her to remember and to carry it, and Maya had said yes. And Maya was not in the habit of breaking promises, especially not promises to dead women who had seen something in her when she was 9 years old and had waited 25 years to see if they had been right. She closed the trunk. She picked up her phone. She called Walter Thurman's emergency number, which was printed on the bottom of the receipt he had given her the previous Friday. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep, and Maya apologized for calling so late and then explained, as calmly as she could, what had just happened with her sister. Walter Thurman listened without interrupting. When she had finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Miss Reeves, I am going to give you my colleague's name. Her name is Patricia Halloway. She specializes in estate litigation. I will call her myself tomorrow morning and ask her to make room for you. In the meantime, do not discuss the estate with your sister or with anyone in your family. Do not respond to any communications from anyone making claims against the trunk. If anyone shows up at your apartment or at your place of work, you call the police and you call me. Do you understand?" "Yes. Your great-aunt knew what she was doing when she wrote that will. I drafted it with her. She was of entirely sound mind. She talked about you specifically. She said she had been thinking about you for years. She knew who she wanted to receive her belongings, and she knew why. A contested will is not going to go well for your sister, Miss Reeves. It is going to cost her money, and she is going to lose. But it is going to be unpleasant for you in the meantime. You should prepare yourself for that." "I understand. Try to get some sleep." Maya did not get much sleep. She lay in bed next to Rosie, who had crawled in during the night as she often did, and she watched the ceiling and thought about everything that was about to happen. She thought about the buyer arriving from Chicago in the morning. She thought about $42,000 in her account by Wednesday. She thought about Denise and Robert and the strangers named Kyle and Emma, who were now apparently a problem in her life. She thought about Patricia Halloway, whoever that was, and what Patricia Halloway was going to cost. She thought about Rosie, who did not know any of this, and who still thought tomorrow was just another Tuesday. Tuesday morning arrived cold and clear. Maya drove to Centerville with Rosie and the jewelry box on the passenger seat, wrapped in the pillowcase, and she parked behind the shop and carried it inside with both hands. The buyer was a tall woman in her 50s named Regina Moss. She had silver blonde hair cut into a sharp bob, and she wore a cream-colored wool coat over a black dress. And when Eleanor Park introduced them, Regina Moss looked at Maya with the same combination of professional composure and quiet recognition that Eleanor Park had shown when she had first opened the jewelry box. Maya realized, standing in the back room of the shop, that she was surrounded by people who knew things she did not know, and who had decided, for reasons she did not yet understand, that they were going to help her. The examination took an hour. Regina Moss looked at the earrings under a loupe. She weighed them on the precision scale. She photographed them from multiple angles. She compared them to images in a binder she had brought with her from Chicago. She asked Maya several questions about the trunk and about Aunt Harriet and about Eleanor Reeves, and Maya answered them as honestly as she could. And at the end of the hour, Regina Moss closed her binder and said, "I will pay $45,000. Mrs. Park said 42. "I have decided they are worth 45. I would like to purchase them for 45, if you are willing." Maya did not know how to negotiate this. She did not know the rules of the world she was standing in. She looked at Eleanor Park, who gave her the smallest nod, and Maya said, "Yes. 45. Regina Moss wrote a check. She handed it to Maya. The check was drawn on a bank Maya had never heard of, and the amount on the face of the check was $45,000.00, and Maya held it in her hand and looked at the number, and she did not know what to do. She had never held a check that size. She did not even know how to deposit it. "Eleanor will help you with the deposit," Regina Moss said. She was watching Maya's face carefully. "She will walk you through the process. She will also give you the name of a bank that is more comfortable with checks of this size than some of the smaller branches. I want you to understand something, Miss Reeves. This is the first of what I expect will be several transactions. I would like to be considered as a buyer for additional pieces from the collection when and if you decide to sell them. I will match or exceed any competing offer from an ethical dealer. I am telling you this now because I want you to know that you have choices. You do not need to accept the first offer you receive. You do not need to rush. You have time now. Use it wisely." "Thank you. Thank you. I have wanted to see these earrings in person for 15 years. I knew they existed because of a photograph in an archive, but I had no idea who owned them. Meeting them in this context has made my week. My month, actually. My year. Miss Reeves, your great-grandmother was extraordinary. I hope you learn everything there is to learn about her. She deserves to be remembered." Regina Moss shook her hand. She put the earrings, now hers, into a padded velvet box inside a leather briefcase. She said goodbye to Rosie, who had been drawing quietly in the corner for the last hour, and she left. Maya sat down in the chair next to the long wooden table, and she put the check on the table in front of her, and she stared at it. "Mrs. Park, I do not have a bank. I know. We are going to open an account for you today. Get your daughter in the car. Eleanor Park drove them to a bank in Centerville that she said was accustomed to serving clients with complex financial needs. The branch manager was a woman named Hannah Park, who Maya discovered halfway through the appointment was Eleanor Park's daughter, which explained some things and made other things make even more sense. Hannah Park opened a checking account and a savings account for Maya. She set up the accounts so that the $45,000 check could be deposited directly and safely, though she warned Maya that there would be a hold on the funds for 3 business days while the check cleared. She gave Maya a temporary debit card and a welcome packet and a business card with her personal cell phone number on the back. She told Maya that if she had any questions about anything, any time, day or night, she should call, and she meant it. On the way out of the bank, Eleanor Park put her hand on Maya's arm. Miss Reeves, you look like you are holding yourself together with tape. I probably am. Please listen to me. This is not over. The authentication is still ongoing. The larger sales will take months. And based on what you told me last night about your sister, you are going to have some difficult weeks ahead. You need to take care of yourself. You need to eat. You need to sleep. You need to take care of your daughter. And you need to call the lawyer Mr. Thurmond recommended. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. I will. Good. Maya called Patricia Halloway from the parking lot. Patricia answered her own phone. She was a woman with a direct, unhurried voice who sounded, on the phone, like she was probably in her late 40s. Walter Thurmond had already called her that morning, she said, and had explained the situation. She had cleared her afternoon to meet with Maya. She asked Maya if she could come to her office downtown at 2 o'clock. Maya could. Patricia Halloway's office was on the 5th floor of an older building on Main Street, in a suite that she shared with 2 other attorneys. She was tall and had short gray hair and wore a dark blazer over a white blouse, and her handshake was firm and quick. She took Maya and Rosie into her office and offered Rosie a bag of pretzels and a juice box from a small refrigerator in the corner, and she got Maya a glass of water, and then she sat down behind her desk and opened a legal pad and asked Maya to tell her everything from the beginning. Maya did. She tried to keep it organized. She started with the phone call from Walter Thurmond and walked through the entire 2 weeks, including the pawn shop and the buyer and the check in her bag and the call from Denise last night. Patricia took notes in shorthand that Maya could not read. When Maya was finished, Patricia looked up. Miss Reeves, I want to give you my honest assessment. Your sister's threat to contest the will is almost certainly not going to result in a successful contest. Walter Thurmond is a very careful attorney. He drafted a will that will stand up in court. He has contemporaneous notes documenting your great aunt's mental capacity. Eleanor Reeves's collection was deliberately and specifically bequeathed to you in a document that was executed in 2003, long before any cognitive decline would have been an issue. A contest will fail. But a contest will still be filed, if your sister has the money to file it and the emotional investment to pursue it. And the filing itself is going to create problems for you. It is going to create public records that may attract unwanted attention. It is going to delay your ability to freely sell the rest of the collection if there is a lease pendens filed against the assets. It is going to cost you money and legal fees. And it is going to be emotionally exhausting, because you will be in conflict with your sister for months or possibly years. What do? We have options. The first option is that we wait for her to file, and we defend vigorously. We will win, but it will take time. The second option is that we are proactive. We send her a letter, now, through her attorney if she has one, informing her that we are aware of her stated intention to contest the will, that we have the evidence necessary to defeat any such contest, and that if she files, we will pursue reimbursement of all legal fees and costs from her personally at the conclusion of the case. This will put significant pressure on her to reconsider. Many people, when they understand what a losing contest will actually cost them out of pocket, decide not to pursue it. She does not have a lot of money. She has money, but she does not have a lot of extra money. And her husband will push her to pursue it because he sees the money at stake. Then we want to make sure that your sister understands, as clearly as possible, that she will lose, and that losing will cost her. Sometimes the best way to stop a lawsuit is to make sure everyone involved understands what the consequences of losing are going to be. Okay, I will draft the letter this afternoon. Mr. Thurmond and I will review it together. We will send it by Wednesday morning. In the meantime, I have a few things I need from you. I need copies of everything you have. The will, the receipts, the correspondence with Mrs. Park, the authentication documents, anything your aunt left you in writing, the note she wrote you, all of it. I can bring it tomorrow. Good. Miss Reeves, there is one more thing I need to ask you. Forgive me for being direct. Where are you going to be living next week? Maya stared at her hands in her lap. I have 6 days before I am evicted from my apartment. I was going to call my landlord tomorrow, once the check cleared, to try to pay everything off and stop the eviction. If he does not accept, I was going to find another apartment. Your landlord will accept. People accept money, Miss Reeves, especially from tenants who have suddenly found themselves able to pay. That is not my concern. My concern is that your current apartment is a potentially dangerous location for you and your daughter given what is in it. Do you have family members or friends in Dayton who would not be involved in any dispute over the estate? I have Henry. He owns the laundromat where I work. He is a friend. Would he be willing to let you stay with him for a week or two until you can make other arrangements? I don't know. Maybe. He has a small house. His wife is sick. I understand. I want you to think about this. It is not safe for you to continue sleeping in an apartment where people in your family know you keep millions of dollars of jewelry. I would recommend, strongly, that you move the jewelry to a secure location as soon as possible. Mrs. Park would almost certainly agree to store it in her shop's vault for you. And I would recommend, for your own safety, that you not spend tonight in your apartment. Is that an option? Maya felt cold. She had not thought about any of this. She had been so focused on the money and the authentication and her sister that she had not thought about the fact that the information Denise now had was not information that was going to stay inside her own family. Robert would talk. Kyle and Emma, whoever they were, would talk. People would begin to know. I can ask Henry. I will call him when I leave here. Good. If Henry cannot host you, I can put you in a hotel tonight on the firm's account. We will discuss reimbursement later. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Thank you. You do not need to thank me, Miss Reeves. You are a client. I am doing my job. Though I will say, and I do not often say this to my clients, I think your great-aunt chose the right person. Not everyone who suddenly inherits a fortune thinks first about whether they should move the jewelry to a vault. Most people think first about what they are going to buy. You are listening. That is a good sign. Maya and Rosie left Patricia Halloway's office at 3:30. Maya called Henry from the car. Henry listened. Then he said, "You come to the house tonight. Both of you. Marguerite will be happy. She has been asking about Rosie for weeks. Come at 6. Maya drove back to Centerville and met Eleanor Park and arranged for the jewelry box to be placed in the shop's vault that evening. Under a custody agreement Eleanor Park drafted on the spot and had notarized at the bank across the street by a notary she apparently knew personally. She drove home and packed 2 bags, one for herself and one for Rosie, and she picked up the photographs and letters and journals from the trunk and put them in a duffel bag, and she closed the trunk and slid it into the back of her bedroom closet and covered it with a blanket. She locked the apartment. She drove to Henry's house on the south side of town, a small bungalow on a street with mature trees and cracked sidewalks. And when Henry opened the front door, his wife Marguerite was standing behind him in a bathrobe and slippers, and Marguerite looked at Rosie and said, "Come inside, sweet girl. I have cookies. I have been waiting all week for somebody who deserves cookies." That was where Maya was when her sister Denise's Chrysler pulled up outside the apartment building on Kellerman Avenue at 7:15 on Tuesday night, with Robert in the passenger seat and Kyle and Emma following in a separate car. And when nobody answered the buzzer for apartment 3B, Denise used her key, which she had taken from their mother 3 years ago without asking, and let herself inside. Henry's phone rang at 7:32. It was Deshawn, the upstairs neighbor, who had seen the strangers on the security camera in the hallway and had recognized Denise from photographs Maya had shown him once, and who had the good sense to call Maya's workplace, and who had been redirected to Henry's home number by the answering service at the laundromat. "Miss Maya," Deshawn said, "your sister is in your apartment right now. She has 3 other people with her. They are going through your stuff. I don't know what to do." Maya closed her eyes. She was standing in Henry's kitchen. Marguerite was at the table with Rosie, showing her how to fold paper into the shape of a crane. The kitchen smelled like cookies. The house was warm and quiet. Everything that had happened today felt very far away, and now, suddenly, it was all back. "Deshawn, Thank you. Thank you so much. Call 911. Tell them there are intruders in your neighbor's apartment. Tell them you have reason to believe they are going to steal something valuable. Give them apartment 3B. My name is Maya Reeves. I am the tenant. I am not there. I have not given anyone permission to enter. Tell them everything. I am going to call my lawyer right now, and she is going to call the police too. Okay. Okay. I'm on it. Maya hung up. She called Patricia Halloway. Patricia picked up on the second ring. Maya told her what had happened. Patricia said, I will handle it. Stay where you are. Do not come home tonight. Do not come home tomorrow. I will call you when the apartment is secure. Maya put the phone down on the kitchen counter. Henry was watching her from the doorway. Marguerite was watching her from the table. Rosie was still folding paper. Henry, Maya said. Her voice was shaking. She could not make it stop. I think we need to stay longer than one night. Whatever you need, Henry said. That was the beginning of the real fight. The Dayton police arrived at the apartment on Kellerman Avenue at 7:48. Deshawn let them in with his own key because he had been holding on to a spare for Maya since the previous summer, when she had locked herself out on a Saturday and had to call a locksmith and had promised herself never to go through that again. The officers entered apartment 3B to find 4 adults in the living room. Denise was standing next to the couch with her coat still on. Robert was seated in the armchair by the window. A tall, thin man in his early 40s who introduced himself as Kyle Reeves was in the kitchen going through Maya's mail. A woman who introduced herself as Emma Reeves was sitting on the floor with the closet blanket pulled back and the trunk open in front of her. The trunk was open. Maya found out about that part 2 hours later, when Patricia Halloway called her at Henry's house to give her a full report. The officers had asked the 4 adults to leave the apartment. Denise had claimed that she was family and had every right to be there. The officer in charge had explained, patiently, that the lease was in Maya's name, that Maya had not given consent, and that unless Denise could produce documentation proving otherwise, she was trespassing. Denise had tried to argue. Robert had tried to intervene. Kyle had remained silent. Emma had started to cry, though whether the tears were real or performed, the officer could not tell. The 4 of them had been escorted out of the building. No arrests had been made, because Maya had not yet filed a formal complaint, and because the officers had decided, given the family relationship, that a formal report and a warning would be sufficient for the moment. But the incident had been documented. A case number had been assigned, and Patricia Halloway had been on the phone with the watch commander for the better part of an hour, explaining the situation and making absolutely certain that the department understood what was at stake. Miss Reeves, Patricia said, I need you to listen to me carefully. Your apartment is now a crime scene, at least informally. I have requested that an officer remain outside the building tonight. Tomorrow morning, at first light, I want you and I to go to the apartment together with a locksmith and change the locks. I also want us to go through the apartment and document, with photographs, the condition of every item of significance. We will inventory the trunk. We will inventory the journals. We will inventory anything else of value. And then we will move the entire trunk and all of its contents to the vault at Mrs. Park's shop, where it will remain under professional security until this matter is resolved. Okay. I also want to inform you that I have already drafted an emergency petition for a restraining order against your sister, her husband, and the 2 cousins. I will file it first thing tomorrow morning. Given tonight's events, I expect the judge will grant a temporary order within 48 hours. Your sister and her associates will not be permitted to come within 500 feet of you, your daughter, or your residence. If they do, they will be subject to arrest. Patricia, yes. I don't know how to thank you. Miss Reeves, please stop thanking me. I am doing my job, and I am good at it, and I do not require thanks. What I require from you is that you sleep tonight. Can you do that? I don't know. Try. Tomorrow will be a long day. Maya ended the call. She set the phone down on the kitchen counter. Henry had left to bring more blankets down from the attic. Marguerite was tucking Rosie into the guest bed in the small back bedroom that had once belonged to their son before he had grown up and moved to Pittsburgh. Maya could hear Marguerite's voice, low and melodic, telling Rosie a story about a girl who found a door inside a tree. Rosie was giggling. Rosie had not giggled like that in a long time. Maya sat down at the kitchen table. She put her hands flat against the wood, and she watched her fingers tremble, and she waited for the trembling to stop. It did not stop. It would not stop for a long time. She thought about Aunt Harriet. She thought about the note. For my great-niece Maya. I hope you still remember. She thought. I remember. I remember. And I am not going to let them take this. Outside, the wind picked up along the quiet streets of the south side of Dayton. Inside the small bungalow, Marguerite finished her story and kissed Rosie on the forehead and turned out the light. Henry came back downstairs with the blankets and set them on the couch and poured Maya a cup of tea she did not ask for and did not have the energy to refuse. Somewhere in an apartment on Kellerman Avenue, a police officer sat in a cruiser parked at the curb with the engine running and the heater on, watching the front door of the building and waiting for morning. Morning arrived cold and gray over the city of Dayton. Maya had slept for perhaps 3 hours, curled on the couch in Henry and Marguerite's living room under a quilt that smelled like cedar and something faintly herbal, and when she opened her eyes at 5:45, she found Marguerite already awake in the kitchen, moving quietly between the stove and the counter in her bathrobe, making coffee and cracking eggs into a cast-iron skillet. "I didn't know if you took coffee," Marguerite said. "I made it anyway. You can ignore it if you don't." "I take coffee." "Good. Sit. Eat. You look like you haven't had a real breakfast in a year." Maya sat. She ate. Marguerite did not try to make conversation, for which Maya was unspeakably grateful. She ate 2 eggs and a piece of toast, and drank a mug of coffee that tasted better than any coffee she had made for herself in longer than she could remember. Rosie came into the kitchen at 6:30, still in her pajamas, and Marguerite fixed her a plate of scrambled eggs with cheese and sat her at the table and asked her what she thought about the ceiling in the guest bedroom, because Marguerite was thinking of painting it a different color, and Rosie considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all adult inquiries, and she told Marguerite that she thought pale yellow would be nice, like the inside of a daisy, and Marguerite said that was exactly what she had been thinking too, and Maya watched her daughter eat breakfast in a warm kitchen with an old woman who was paying attention to her, and Maya understood, for the first time, what some of the next year was going to look like. Patricia Holloway picked Maya up at 7:30 in a dark blue sedan. The locksmith met them at the apartment on Kellerman Avenue. A uniformed officer was still parked at the curb, and he nodded to Patricia as she walked past, and Patricia nodded back in the way that 2 professionals who respect each other nod in passing. They went up to the 3rd floor. The locksmith changed the locks on the apartment door. Patricia walked through each room with a digital camera, photographing everything, and Maya walked behind her and tried to see the apartment through Patricia's eyes instead of her own. Emma had been going through the trunk. The journals had been moved. The wooden jewelry box, which Maya had placed in Eleanor Park's vault the day before, had obviously been what they were looking for, and when they had not found it, they had started looking through other things. Photographs were scattered on the floor. One of the packets of letters had been untied. The clothing at the bottom of the trunk had been pulled out and left in a pile. Maya stood in the living room and looked at the mess, and she did not cry. She had cried the night before. She had cried in Henry's kitchen while Henry pretended to look for a light bulb he had already found. She had cried in the shower before she went to bed. She had done her crying. Now she was done with that for the moment. What she felt now was something colder and more useful. Patricia photographed the disarray. She took notes. She labeled everything. By 10 o'clock, she and Maya had repacked the trunk with care, and the locksmith had delivered 3 new keys, and the officer from the curb had come upstairs to collect a written statement from Maya, and by noon, a moving truck hired by Patricia's firm had arrived to transport the trunk and Maya's most important personal belongings to a storage unit that Patricia had rented in the name of her law firm for exactly this purpose. The trunk would be safe. The contents would be safe. Maya would be safe. That afternoon, Patricia filed the petition for a temporary restraining order. She filed it personally at the Montgomery County Courthouse and walked it through the clerk's office with the efficiency of someone who had done this particular dance hundreds of times. By 3 o'clock, she had a phone call with Judge Martha Oberlin, who had read the petition, reviewed the police report from the previous night, and granted a temporary order against Denise Reeves Halverson, her husband Robert Halverson, Kyle Reeves, and Emma Reeves Sullivan. The order was served on all 4 that evening by a process server in Cincinnati. Maya was sitting at Henry and Marguerite's kitchen table when Patricia called to confirm the service. "They have it," Patricia said. "All 4. Confirmed in writing. They cannot come within 500 feet of you, your daughter, your workplace, Henry's home, or any location where the estate is being stored." If they do, the officers will arrest them. Will it hold? The temporary order is in place for 21 days. We have a hearing scheduled in 3 weeks to make it permanent. I expect we will prevail at the hearing. Your sister's attorney has already called me. She has retained a lawyer named Gerald Phillips out of Cincinnati. He is competent. He is also not stupid. He is going to tell her that contesting the will is a losing proposition. And if she continues to pursue aggressive tactics, she is going to find herself facing criminal trespass charges, which the Dayton police have indicated they will pursue if she violates the restraining order. Is that likely to stop her? I don't know your sister. You know your sister. What do you think? Maya thought about the phone call from 2 nights ago. She thought about Robert's voice in the background. She thought about the way Denise had said that Kyle and Emma were coming, like they were an army she was mustering. She thought about all the years of small, sharp cruelties between her and Denise. All the ways her sister had never quite let Maya be a whole person in her own right. I think she will try one more thing before she gives up. I don't know what, but I think she will try something. Then we stay vigilant. Maya stayed at Henry and Marguerite's house for the next 2 weeks. She kept working at the laundromat because it gave her days structure and because she did not want to explain to Henry that she was now rich, though she suspected Henry had figured some of it out from context. Rosie kept going to school. Every morning, Marguerite walked Rosie to the bus stop at the corner, and every afternoon, Rosie came home to Marguerite's kitchen and did her homework at the table while Marguerite baked or knitted or read aloud to her from a novel about a girl who ran away to join the circus. In the evenings, Maya came home, and the 4 of them ate dinner together. And after Rosie went to bed, Henry and Marguerite would sit in the living room with Maya and not ask her any questions unless she volunteered something first. On the 8th day at Henry's house, Maya received a letter, forwarded through Patricia's office, from Walter Thurmond. Inside was a sealed envelope with Maya's name written on it in Aunt Harriet's hand. The envelope had been inside a drawer in Walter's desk, he explained in his cover note, and he had only located it after going back through his records of the estate following the events of the past 2 weeks. He apologized for the delay in providing it. He had forgotten it existed. His instructions from Harriet had been to deliver it to Maya only if a dispute arose over the contents of the trunk. A dispute had arisen. Maya sat at Henry and Marguerite's kitchen table at 9:30 at night, after Rosie had gone to sleep, and she opened the envelope with hands that were surprisingly steady. Inside were 3 things. A letter, written in Harriet's thin, spidery hand on 2 sheets of pale blue stationery. A photograph, worn and creased, of Maya at 9 years old, sitting on a couch in Harriet's front parlor, holding a book in her lap and looking up at the camera with a solemn, thoughtful expression. And a small cassette tape, the kind that went into an old-fashioned tape recorder, labeled in Harriet's hand, for Maya. If they come for the trunk. Maya read the letter first. My dear Maya, Harriet had written, if you are reading this, then my fears about your family have proven correct, and I am sorry for it. I watched them as children. I watched them as adults. I knew what they were. I chose to trust you with what belonged to our family because I knew, when I met you as a little girl, that you were not like them. I knew from the way you looked at the photographs I showed you. I knew from the questions you asked. I knew from the way you listened. Children tell the truth about themselves in how they listen, and you listen like someone who understood that what was being said to you mattered. Your sister, when she visited, did not listen. She looked at the clock. She asked when you could leave. She was a child, and I do not hold that against a child, but I watched her grow into an adult who still did not listen, and I made my decisions about my estate accordingly. Maya paused. She set the letter down. She picked up the photograph. She remembered that day. She remembered sitting on that couch. She remembered Aunt Harriet holding up a camera, one of the old point-and-shoots that took actual film, and asking her to smile, and Maya refusing to smile because she had been 9 and serious and had thought smiling on command was dishonest. The photograph showed exactly the expression she had intended. Serious, watchful, a little stubborn. She picked up the letter again. The tape, Harriet had written, was recorded 2 years before I moved into the assisted living facility. On it, I explain, in my own voice, exactly what is in the trunk, exactly what it is worth, exactly why I am leaving it to you and not to any other member of the family, and exactly what I expect you to do with it. I recorded it because I knew that if your sister or your cousins learned of the value, they would try to claim that I was not in my right mind when I wrote my will. They will say I had dementia. They will say I was confused. They will say I did not understand what I was doing. The tape will prove them wrong. On the tape, I speak clearly. I answer questions from a witness. I identify myself, the date, and my circumstances. I make my intentions as clear as daylight. Any court that listens to this tape will know that I knew exactly what I was doing. Use the tape if you need it. Do not be afraid to use it. Your great-grandmother Eleanor did not make jewelry for people who were afraid. She made jewelry for women who were going to be remembered. You are going to be remembered, Maya. I chose you because I saw it in you when you were 9 years old. I am sorry I did not know you better as an adult. I am sorry I did not reach out sooner. I was a stubborn old woman, and I told myself that I was giving you space, when really I was just afraid. Be braver than I was. Go do something with what I am leaving you. Make the women in our family proud. With love, your great Aunt Harriet. Maya sat at the table for a long time. She did not cry, because she had done all her crying for that week already. But she sat. She held the letter in her hands. She looked at the photograph of herself at 9 years old. She thought about the fact that her great-aunt, whom she had seen 3 times in her entire life, had cared enough about her to record a tape and write a letter and hide them both with an attorney against a future contest that she had correctly predicted would happen. Aunt Harriet had seen Denise coming. Aunt Harriet had seen Robert coming. Aunt Harriet had known. Maya called Patricia Halloway at 10 o'clock. Patricia answered on the first ring. Maya told her about the letter and the photograph and the tape. Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Miss Reeves, your great-aunt was an extraordinary woman. I am going to need the tape. I am going to need it tomorrow morning. I am going to have a professional transcription service transcribe it, and I am going to have the transcription notarized, and I am going to put a certified copy in our case file. If your sister proceeds with a contest, we are going to introduce the tape as evidence. The tape is going to destroy her case." Is that legal? Entering a tape like that as evidence? It is called a declaration against interest, and yes, it is legal. Your great-aunt's statements on the tape, made contemporaneously with the drafting of the will and corroborating her testamentary intent, will be admissible under the hearsay exception for statements by a now-deceased party. Gerald Phillips will know this the moment he sees the tape. He will advise his client to withdraw any contest. Okay, Miss Reeves, your great-aunt did not just leave you a fortune. She left you everything you needed to keep it. I have been practicing law for 22 years. I have never seen anything like this. Maya ended the call. She went to sleep that night on Henry and Marguerite's couch, and for the first time in nearly 3 weeks, she slept for 6 uninterrupted hours. The tape was delivered to Patricia the next morning. Patricia had it transcribed that afternoon. By Thursday of that week, Gerald Phillips had received a copy of the transcription and an offer from Patricia. Denise and the cousins would sign a document formally renouncing any claim against the estate, in exchange for Maya agreeing not to pursue criminal charges for the trespass at her apartment. If they signed, the matter was closed. If they did not sign, Patricia would pursue every available avenue, including criminal prosecution. Gerald Phillips called Patricia at 10 o'clock on Friday morning and informed her that his clients would sign. The signatures were collected the following Tuesday at a mediation conducted in a conference room at Patricia's firm. Maya was not required to be present. Denise sent the signed document via overnight courier and included no note, no apology, no explanation of any kind. Kyle and Emma signed theirs and sent them from Indianapolis. Robert's signature appeared on Denise's document as a witness. The envelope contained nothing else. Maya was at Henry's laundromat when Patricia called to tell her the documents had been received and logged into the file. She was folding a queen-sized fitted sheet. She set the sheet down carefully. She walked to the back office where Henry kept his desk and his filing cabinets. She sat down in Henry's chair. It's done. It's done. She's not going to contest. She cannot contest. She has signed a legal document waiving any and all claims. If she tries to raise the matter again, the document will be produced and the matter will be dismissed. Patricia. Yes. Thank you. Miss Reeves. You are welcome. Now go take your daughter out to dinner. Go somewhere nice. She deserves it. And so do you. Maya picked Rosie up from school at 3 o'clock and took her to a diner on the north side of town that had a counter and red vinyl booths and milkshakes made the old way. Rosie ordered a grilled cheese and French fries and a chocolate milkshake. Maya ordered a cheeseburger and coffee. They ate in a booth near the window, and they watched the late afternoon traffic move slowly along Dixie Highway. and Rosie told Maya about a girl in her class named Amanda who had brought a pet gerbil to school for show and tell. And the gerbil had escaped during the presentation and had run under the bookshelves, and the class had spent the rest of the afternoon trying to catch it, and Rosie had been the one who caught it, because she had thought to look inside the heating vent, which was where gerbils apparently liked to hide. The teacher said I was a hero, Rosie said. But I told her I wasn't. I just paid attention. That's the same thing, baby. No, it's not. It is, actually. It really is. Rosie considered this while she drank her milkshake. Her face was thoughtful in the way that Marguerite's face was thoughtful when she was considering something, and Maya realized with a small shock that her daughter was already absorbing the mannerisms of the woman she had been living with for 3 weeks. Children did that. They watched. They took on the shapes of the people around them. Maya had forgotten how fast it happened. Mama. Yeah, baby. Are we going to be able to stay with Henry and Marguerite forever? No, baby. We're not going to stay with them forever. But we're going to stay with them a little longer, until we figure out where we want to live. Do you have any ideas about that? Rosie looked out the window. The sun was going down over the city. The sky had turned the color of a peach. I want a house, she said. Like Marguerite's house. Not an apartment. A house with a yard. And maybe a dog. Can we have a dog? Yeah, baby. I think we can have a dog. Rosie nodded solemnly and went back to her milkshake. Over the next 3 months, Eleanor Park and Patricia Halloway and a tax attorney named David Singh, whom Patricia had brought in to handle the financial side, worked together to bring the rest of the collection to market. They did it slowly and carefully, and with the kind of attention to detail that Maya had never known was available in the world. Pieces were sold individually to collectors and to museums. 2 rings were acquired by the Art Institute of Chicago, which had an Eleanor Reeves retrospective in its planning stages. The peacock brooch, the one Rosie had held on the first night, was purchased by a private collector in New York for $182,000. The strand of pearls that had once been Eleanor Reeves's own was acquired by a museum in Dallas. By the end of that summer, the collection had been fully liquidated. The final accounting, after Eleanor Park's commission and Patricia's legal fees and David Singh's tax work and all other associated costs, was $4,317,852. After federal and state taxes, Maya's net was $3,186,000. $3,186,000. Maya sat in David Singh's office on a Wednesday afternoon in August. He had just shown her the final accounting on a laptop screen. She was staring at the number and trying to make it seem real. Miss Reeves, David said, I want to be clear about something. This is a very large sum of money. It is going to generate investment income for the rest of your life, if you manage it carefully. It is going to allow you to make significant decisions about how you live. It is also going to expose you to risks and pressures that you have not faced before. I want to recommend that we build a financial plan that protects the principal and allows you to live on the income. I also want to recommend that we establish a trust structure that will protect the money from future claims and that will allow you to leave something to your daughter. Yes. I would also like to recommend, and I know this is not strictly my professional lane, that you take some time before you make any major decisions. Do not buy a house this month. Do not quit your job this week. Take your time. Think about what you actually want. The money is not going anywhere. Maya did exactly what David suggested. She did not quit the laundromat. She did not buy a house. She did, however, pay off every bill she owed. She paid her back rent in full on the Kellerman Avenue apartment, and then she gave notice, because she had decided she was not going to live there anymore. Not because she could not afford to, but because the apartment had been the place where her family had broken in, and she did not want that memory to be part of where she slept. She paid off her Honda Civic, which she had still owed $600 on. She paid Henry back for the 3 weeks of rent she had insisted on giving him despite his protests. And then she paid him an additional $5,000, which she insisted was rent for the full month of hospitality he and Marguerite had given her, and Henry had refused it, and Maya had put it in Marguerite's purse when Henry was not looking. She paid Deshawn, her upstairs neighbor at the Kellerman apartment, $1,000 as a thank you for calling her the night her family broke in. Deshawn tried to refuse it. Maya told him that if he did not take it, she was going to write him a check for twice the amount and mail it to him, and he would have to deal with it either way. Deshawn took the $1,000. She paid for Rosie's shoes. She paid for a new winter coat for Rosie. She paid for a shopping trip at a department store where Rosie got to choose, for the first time in her life, 5 complete outfits that fit her properly and had not been purchased at a thrift store or handed down from somebody else's older child. She paid for her own shoes, too. 1 pair. Nothing fancy. Just a pair of plain black flats that fit her feet correctly. She took Rosie to the dentist for the first time in 2.5 years. Rosie needed 2 small fillings. Maya paid for them in full. She took herself to a doctor, too, and got a physical, which she had been avoiding for 5 years, and she got a clean bill of health, and she also got a referral to a therapist, because she had finally accepted that what had happened to her over the past 18 months was going to require professional help to process. In October, 6 months after she had walked into Walter Thurman's office and paid $200 in cash for a steamer trunk full of her Greytant's belongings, Maya bought a house. The house was on a street called Maplewood Drive in a neighborhood on the south side of Dayton, 4 blocks from where Henry and Marguerite lived. It was a small brick 2-story with a detached garage and a fenced backyard and a flowering dogwood tree in the front yard that would bloom pink in April. The house had 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms and a finished basement with good natural light. It had been built in 1952, and the last owners, an elderly couple whose children had moved them into assisted living, had kept it in excellent condition. The kitchen needed updating. The bathrooms were original. The wood floors throughout were original too, and they were beautiful. Maya bought the house for $198,000, cash. She did not need a mortgage. She had never needed a mortgage in her life, but she had always assumed that if she ever bought a house, she would have to borrow money to do it. That was how houses worked. That was how she had understood the world to work. To walk into a title company with a cashier's check for the full purchase price was an experience so foreign to her that she had to sit down for a moment in the conference room and breathe before she could finish signing the paperwork. They moved in on a Saturday in late October, with Henry driving a pickup truck full of furniture Maya had bought over the previous 2 weeks at a combination of antique stores and actual furniture stores, because she had not wanted everything in the house to be new, and because she had wanted the spaces to feel like they had history. Rosie chose her own bedroom. It was the smaller of the 2 on the 2nd floor, the one with the window that looked out into the dogwood tree. She wanted to paint it pale yellow, like the inside of a daisy. Maya bought the paint. Maya painted the room herself over the following weekend, with Rosie helping to roll the lower half of the walls while Maya did the upper half. And when it was done, Rosie stood in the middle of the empty bedroom and looked around and started to cry, which she almost never did. And Maya knelt down on the drop cloth and held her daughter, and Rosie said, through the tears, that it was the best room that had ever existed. "It's yours, baby. It's yours forever. Forever. As long as you want it. For the rest of your life, if you want it. Whatever you want." Rosie cried for a while after that. Not loud, shaking crying, but a steady, quiet weeping that Maya understood was the release of something her daughter had been holding since the night her father had left, 1.5 years ago now, when Rosie had been 5 years old and had been sitting on the couch in the apartment with her mother and had watched the front door close and had known, in the way children know things they are not supposed to know, that something was over. Rosie had not cried that night. She had not cried through the evictions and the moves in the months when Maya had held everything together with the thinnest possible thread. She had carried it all. She had been the quiet, steady child who did her homework at the library and did not ask for things she knew her mother could not give her. Now, standing in the middle of a pale yellow bedroom in a house her mother owned outright, on a quiet street in a good neighborhood, in a place where no landlord was going to knock on the door with an eviction notice, she had finally let it go. Maya held her daughter until Rosie was done crying. Then she helped her up off the drop cloth, and they went downstairs together, and Maya made grilled cheese sandwiches on the new stove in the new kitchen, and they ate them at the small kitchen table that Maya had bought at an estate sale in Oakwood the previous weekend. The table was old and sturdy, made of oak, with a finish that had been worn down by decades of meals before it had come to their house. Maya had liked that about it. The table had history. The table had served other families before it had come to theirs. Now it would serve them for a while, and then someday, maybe, it would go on and serve somebody else. That was the way of things. That was, Maya had come to understand, exactly the way she wanted the way of things to be. Henry came over that evening to check that everything had made it into the house in one piece. Marguerite came with him. She brought a casserole in a covered dish, which was the kind of thing Marguerite always did, and a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums from the farmer's market, which Maya put in a vase on the kitchen counter. The four of them had dinner together at the oak table. Winston the dog was still at the shelter then, still 3 weeks away from coming home, but the shape of the future was already clear. Marguerite walked through the house with Maya after dinner, looking into each room, nodding approvingly at choices Maya had made about paint colors and furniture placement, offering small, useful suggestions about where a lamp might go or what kind of rug might warm up the entryway. When they got to the upstairs hallway, Marguerite stopped at the door of Rosie's pale yellow bedroom, which Rosie had already started filling with her books and her stuffed animals and the small things she had accumulated over 18 months of not quite having anywhere to put them. "This is a good room," Marguerite said. "This is a good room." Rosie picked it. She picked well. Children know where they need to be. You just have to give them the chance to choose. Maya nodded. She did not trust her voice to work. Marguerite understood, the way she always seemed to understand, and she put a hand on Maya's shoulder and left it there for a moment, and then she patted Maya once and walked back down the stairs. They got a dog in November. He was a 3-year-old black lab mix with long legs and an anxious disposition that Maya adopted from the Montgomery County Animal Shelter. His name at the shelter had been Charcoal. Rosie renamed him Winston because she had read a book where a dog was named Winston, and she had liked the name. Winston took 3 weeks to fully trust his new home, and then he became the most loyal creature Maya had ever known. He slept at the foot of Rosie's bed every night. He followed Maya around the house when she was home. He liked carrots. Maya had not quit her job. She had reduced her hours to 3 days a week, because Henry had hired a second employee to cover the shifts she had dropped, and because Henry had understood, without her having to explain, that her life was changing and that she needed to be able to step back from the laundromat, but that she did not want to leave it entirely. She still came in on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She still folded sheets. She still made small talk with the regulars. Henry paid her the same hourly rate. He had tried to raise it when he had learned, vaguely, that her finances had improved, and Maya had asked him please not to. She wanted the job to feel the way it had always felt. She wanted to keep that part of her life unchanged. It was in December, just before Christmas, that Maya decided what she was going to do with the money. She had been thinking about it for months. She had been talking about it in therapy. She had been reading books and researching foundations and talking to Patricia and David and anyone else who would help her think through the question of what one person was supposed to do with $3 million when she had lived for most of her adult life on less than $30,000 a year. The answer had come to her slowly. It had come to her through her therapist, who had asked her one day what she thought Aunt Harriet would have wanted her to do. It had come to her through Marguerite, who had told her one afternoon, over tea, about her own mother, who had grown up poor during the Depression and had spent her entire adult life helping other women who were trying to get out of situations that she had not managed to get out of herself. It had come to her through Rosie, who had asked her at breakfast one morning why some kids at school didn't have warm coats. The answer was that Maya was going to start a foundation. Not a big foundation. Not one of those enormous philanthropic organizations with a staff of dozens and a fancy office building. A small foundation. A local foundation. A foundation that would, specifically and only, help single mothers in the Dayton area who were trying to rebuild their lives after divorce or abandonment or abuse. She called it the Harriet Reeves Foundation for Women. She filed the paperwork in January. She put $1 million into the foundation's endowment as the initial gift. She hired a director, a woman, named Jackie Torres, who had spent 15 years running programs at a women's shelter in Columbus and who had wanted, her whole career, to work for an organization that could actually give significant amounts of money directly to the people who needed it. Jackie cried during the interview when Maya described what she wanted to build. Maya had not meant to make her cry. Maya had meant to describe the program. The foundation's mission was simple. It would provide grants of up to $15,000 per recipient to single mothers in Montgomery County who were verifiably working to become self-sufficient. The grants could be used for housing deposits, for childcare, for educational costs, for medical bills, for emergency car repairs, for legal fees, for anything that was documented to directly contribute to the recipient's stability and independence. The application process was simple. There were no lectures. There were no classes. There were no strings. The foundation would review applications, verify circumstances, and either cut a check or explain, kindly and specifically, why a particular application did not fit the foundation's criteria. It would not be a substitute for government programs. It would not try to solve every problem. It would do one thing, and it would do that one thing well. The foundation issued its first grant in March, a year and 10 days after Maya had first walked into Walter Thurman's office to look at the trunk. The recipient was a woman named Sheila Washington, 31 years old, mother of 2, who had left an abusive husband in November and had been living with her sister in a one-bedroom apartment that had become untenable for all 4 of them. Sheila had found an apartment of her own. She needed $3,000 for the first month's rent and the security deposit. She had applied to the foundation on a Wednesday. The foundation had cut her a check on the following Monday. Maya had personally handed the check to her at the foundation's small office downtown, which had been Aunt Harriet's old row house, purchased and renovated as a deliberate choice. Sheila had not known what to say. She had stood in the office with the check in her hand, and she had looked at Maya, and she had said, "I'm sorry. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't thank me," Maya had said. "My aunt left me something she wanted me to share. I'm just sharing it. You take this, and you go make a life for those kids. That's how you thank me." Sheila had cried. Maya had cried too, a little, but not much. She had saved the big crying for later that night, when she was alone in her kitchen with a cup of tea and the light on over the sink and the dog snoring somewhere upstairs. That had been the thing she had not expected about the foundation. It had not felt like giving. It had felt, instead, like something more complicated than giving, something that included giving but also included something else, something Maya did not have a word for. When she handed Sheila Washington that check, she had not felt powerful or generous or benevolent. She had felt, instead, like she was completing a circle. Eleanor had made the jewelry. Harriet had kept it safe. Maya had sold it. And Sheila was going to use the proceeds to find a real apartment for her 2 children, and someday, in some way Maya would probably never see, Sheila was going to pay something forward to someone else, and that was the shape of it. The shape had always been a circle. Nobody had ever given Maya anything except the invitation to step into the circle, and the only real choice was whether to accept the invitation or not. She had accepted. That was the whole thing. She had accepted, and she had kept accepting, one decision at a time. The second grant went to a woman named Tanya who had 3 children and was trying to finish her nursing degree. The third grant went to a woman named Celeste who needed a functional car to get to a new job across town. The fourth went to a woman named Priya who was fleeing her husband and needed legal fees to fight for custody of her daughter. Each of them came to the foundation's small office on the 2nd floor of Aunt Harriet's old row house, which Maya had renovated with deliberate modesty because she had wanted the space to feel welcoming rather than imposing. Each of them sat across from Jackie Torres and told their story, and each of them received, within a week, a check that changed the arithmetic of their lives. Maya was not always present for the check deliveries. She did not want to turn the foundation into a stage for her own feelings. But she came when she could, when Jackie thought it would be helpful, and she listened to women talk about things she had not talked about herself with anyone outside of her therapist's office, and she nodded, and she said the small, unimportant, necessary things that people say in those conversations, and she paid attention. Because Aunt Harriet had once told her that the most important thing a person could do for another person was pay attention, and Maya had come to believe, over the years, that this had been the truest thing anyone had ever said to her. Not every grant worked out. Maya learned that the hard way. A woman named Angela had received $8,000 to stabilize herself and her son, and 6 months later, her son had been taken into foster care, and Angela had disappeared, and nobody at the foundation had been able to locate her to follow up. Maya had taken that one hard. She had asked Jackie, one evening, whether they should stop issuing grants, whether they were not doing enough diligence, whether they were not helping in the right ways. "Miss Reeves," Jackie had said, in her calm, patient voice, "if we stop issuing grants because some of them don't work out, we will issue 0 grants. Some of them will not work. Some of the women will go back to situations we hoped they would escape. Some of them will make decisions we wish they had not made. That is not evidence that we are doing the wrong thing. That is evidence that we are doing something real. Real work has failures. The alternative is to do nothing, and that is not an alternative." Maya had thought about that for a long time afterward. She had thought about how close she had come, more than once, to being one of the ones who did not make it. She had thought about Marcus, and the eviction notice, and the night she had sat at her kitchen table and decided to sell her wedding ring. She had thought about how many women had not had an Aunt Harriet in their lives, and how many more had not had a Patricia or an Eleanor Park or a Henry or a Marguerite. She could not replace those people for every woman who came to the foundation. She could only offer a small piece, a partial version, of what she herself had been given. And some of it was going to land, and some of it was not going to land, and Jackie was right. That was not a reason to stop. The foundation expanded slowly. By the second year, Maya had committed another $500,000 to the endowment. By the third year, a second staff member had been hired, a part-time caseworker named Delia, who handled follow-up calls with grant recipients and who tracked outcomes with the quiet, persistent attention of somebody who genuinely believed that small interventions could change lives. By the fourth year, local newspapers had written 2 articles about the foundation, and other donors had started contributing, unsolicited, small gifts that Maya accepted with gratitude and folded into the general fund. The foundation was never going to be large. Maya did not want it to be large. She wanted it to be exactly the size it was, doing exactly the thing it was doing, for exactly the women it was helping. Over the next 3 years, the Harriet Reeves Foundation for Women gave out 142 grants to single mothers in the Dayton area. Not every grant worked out. Some recipients used the money and still ended up back in difficult situations because the circumstances they had been in were bigger than $15,000 could fix. Some recipients thrived. Some recipients started small businesses. Some recipients went back to school. Some recipients simply got to breathe for the first time in a long time because someone had handed them enough money to stop drowning for a moment. Maya kept working at the laundromat. She kept living in the house on Maplewood Drive. She kept picking Rosie up from school 3 afternoons a week. She did not travel much because she did not particularly want to travel. She did not buy a fancy car because the Honda Civic was still running and because she had developed a stubborn affection for it. She gave a significant gift to the Dayton Public Library because the library had been where she had applied for jobs during the worst months of her homelessness, and she felt that she owed the library something. She gave a gift to the YWCA after-school program where Rosie had gone during those same months because it had kept Rosie safe for $4 an hour. She gave a gift to St. Francis Episcopal, a church near Henry's house, because Marguerite was Episcopalian, and because Marguerite had asked her once, very casually, whether Maya might consider helping them fix their boiler. She did not reconnect with Denise. Denise had called her twice in the first 6 months after the signing of the release documents, and Maya had not answered the phone. She had told Patricia that she was not interested in attempting a reconciliation. Patricia had said she understood and had suggested Maya might want to tell Denise this in writing so that her sister would stop calling. Maya had written a short letter. She had mailed it. Denise had stopped calling. Robert, Maya learned through family members at a cousin's funeral 2 years later, had left Denise shortly after the legal fight had ended. Something about the collapse of his real estate business in Cincinnati. Something about financial stress. Something about the fact that Denise had spent $40,000 on lawyers chasing a fortune she had been told from the beginning she would not win. Maya did not feel vindicated when she heard it. She did not feel glad. She did not feel much of anything, actually, except a faint, distant sadness that her sister had not been able to see her way to a different kind of life. Kyle and Emma, who had been near strangers before all of this, remained near strangers afterward. Maya did not hear from them again. Rosie grew. She turned 8. She turned 9. She turned 10. She stayed in the pale yellow bedroom with the window that looked into the dogwood tree, and she grew tall, and she grew funny, and she grew back into the loud, chaotic, opinionated child she had been before her father had left. She made friends at school. She brought friends home. The house on Maplewood Drive was often full of 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, eating snacks at the kitchen table and running around the fenced backyard with Winston the dog loping after them. And Maya would stand in the kitchen window and watch. And she would think about the 9 days in March when she had been 11 days from eviction with $84 in her checking account. And she would understand, each time, that she was watching something that she had thought was not going to be allowed to her. She went out to Aunt Harriet's grave on the anniversary of her death every year, and she brought flowers, and she sat on the grass next to the headstone. and she told Harriet about what the foundation had done that year, and about how Rosie was doing in school, and about the dog, and about anything else that seemed important to tell. "I remember," Maya said the first time. "I wanted you to know that. I really do remember." On the third anniversary, she brought Rosie with her. Rosie was 10 years old by then. She was tall. She had her mother's stubborn chin and her great-great-grandmother Eleanor's serious mouth, the same mouth that Maya had seen for the first time in the photograph from the jewelry design book, more than 3 years ago. Rosie sat on the grass next to Aunt Harriet's headstone, and she was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Mama, do you think she's proud of us?" "I think she is, baby. Do you think Eleanor is proud of us too?" Maya had been working for the past 2 years on a small project that she had not talked about with Rosie yet. She had been working with a scholar at the University of Chicago on a book about Eleanor Reeves's work. She had contributed Aunt Harriet's journals and the letters and the photographs, and she had funded a research fellowship, and the scholar had been working slowly and carefully on what would eventually become the first comprehensive biography of Eleanor Reeves. The book would come out the following year. Maya had read the draft. It was beautiful. It contained details about Eleanor's life that Maya had not known, and it contained a chapter, which the scholar had insisted on including, about Eleanor's great-granddaughter, Maya Reeves, who had rescued the collection from anonymity and had used it to establish a foundation that had, so far, helped 142 women in her city. "Yeah, baby. I think Eleanor is proud of us too." They sat in the grass for a while longer. The wind moved in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower was running. Rosie put her head on Maya's shoulder. "Mama, yeah, I'm glad you bought the trunk." "Me too, baby. I'm glad Aunt Denise was mean to you on the phone, because if she hadn't been mean to you, you might have listened to her, and you might not have bought it." Maya laughed. It was not the first time Rosie had said something that cut through to the heart of a matter in a way that Maya had not been expecting. It would not be the last. "That's a really good point, baby. I'm a really good pointer." "You are. You really are." They sat in the grass a while longer. The afternoon moved toward evening. Eventually, Maya stood up, and Rosie stood up, and they walked back to the car together, hand in hand. They drove home to the house on Maplewood Drive. They made dinner together. Winston followed them around the kitchen, hoping for scraps. Maya made pasta. Rosie made a salad, because she had decided a month earlier that she was going to be the family's salad specialist. They ate at the kitchen table, and after dinner, Rosie did her homework at the same table while Maya washed the dishes, and then they watched a movie in the living room, a movie about a girl who goes on a long journey and finds her way home, and Rosie fell asleep halfway through with her head in Maya's lap. Maya sat on the couch in the quiet living room of the house she had bought with the inheritance from her great-aunt, which had come from the jewelry designed by her great-grandmother, who had been remembered only because a lonely old woman in a row house had kept a trunk for 60 years and had written a note that said, "I hope you still remember." Maya thought about the women in her family. She thought about Eleanor, who had made beautiful things with her hands. She thought about Harriet, who had kept those things safe, and who had chosen Maya. She thought about herself, at 34, folding sheets at a laundromat with $84 in the bank and a daughter in shoes held together with packing tape. She thought about herself, at 37, sitting on a couch with that same daughter asleep in her lap, in a house she owned, with a dog at her feet, and a foundation that bore her aunt's name, and a book about her great-grandmother due to be published in the spring. She thought about the question that her therapist had asked her years earlier. "What do you think Aunt Harriet would have wanted you to do?" Aunt Harriet had wanted her to remember. That was what the note had said. "I hope you still remember." Maya remembered. She would remember for the rest of her life. She would make sure Rosie remembered. She would make sure the women who received grants from the foundation knew, if they wanted to know, who Harriet Reeves had been, and who Eleanor Reeves had been, and why the money that was changing their lives had come to them. She would make sure that the memory moved forward, and that it kept moving forward, long after she was gone. That was the whole point, really. That was what had always been the whole point, even when she had not known it. The trunk had not been a fortune. The trunk had been a message. Somebody had loved her enough to leave it for her. Somebody had trusted her to carry it forward. And Maya Reeves, 37 years old, sitting on a couch in a quiet house with her daughter asleep in her lap, had accepted the trust and had kept it and would keep it until the last day she was able. Outside the window, the dogwood tree in the front yard was starting to lose its leaves, because autumn was coming on. The street was quiet. A neighbor was walking a dog past the end of the driveway. A car went by. The sky was turning the color of a peach, the same color it had turned 3 years earlier. On the afternoon, Maya had taken Rosie to the diner and bought her a grilled cheese and a milkshake. The color of the sky, Maya thought, was one of those things that did not change. That was good. Some things did not need to change. Some things were already exactly what they were supposed to be. She brushed Rosie's hair back from her daughter's face. She sat on the couch a while longer. She thought about Aunt Harriet. She thought about the note. She thought about what she had done with the 25 years between the parlor and the lawyer's office, and what she would do with the 25 years after. She thought, very quietly, I am going to try to be worthy of this. Every day, until the last day, I am going to try. The dog Winston got up from the rug and stretched, and came over to the couch, and put his head on Maya's knee. Maya scratched his ears. Rosie slept on. The movie had ended a while ago. The television was playing credits, white letters on a black background, rolling slowly up the screen. Maya watched the credits until they finished. Then she turned the television off. The room fell into a quiet broken only by the sound of Rosie breathing and the wind moving in the dogwood tree outside the window. Maya sat in the quiet for a long time. Then, very gently, she shifted Rosie off her lap and stood up, and she carried her daughter upstairs to the pale yellow bedroom, and she tucked her in, and she went to her own bedroom across the hall, and she got into bed, and she fell asleep almost immediately, and she slept the whole night through. In the morning, there would be breakfast. In the morning, there would be school for Rosie and a shift at the laundromat for Maya, and a dog who needed walking and a life that had become, against every odd, a good one. For now, there was only sleep. Deep, uninterrupted sleep, in a house that was hers, in a bed that was hers, on a quiet street in a city she knew by heart. On a night that was the same as all the other nights that had started coming, one after another, ever since she had taken a chance on a steamer trunk that her family had told her to leave alone. Aunt Harriet had been right about her. Aunt Harriet had been right about everything. Maya had remembered, and remembering, it turned out, had been enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.